What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. Naruto gets Athena pregnant. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. I'm glad we did this. It's been so long since it was just the two of us. Athena said, a content smile on her face as she walked the streets of Manhattan. Being one of the busiest out of her family, she took the time to enjoy the rare days she had off, where she could decompress and let the responsibilities of godhood slip away from her shoulders. Dressed in regular clothes like the mortals her family ruled over, she tried not to stand out as she walked the stone streets of New York. To her right, her sister Artemis walked beside her. The daughters of Zeus took solace in each other's company, the similarities between them helping to form the bridge between their close sisterly relationship in their early days of existence. Out of all the gods and goddesses on Olympus, Athena felt her most comfortable when she was with her younger sister. There was no game with Artemis, and no need to keep one eye over her shoulder. The bonds of sisterhood were strong between them, and Athena knew she could rely on Artemis to have her back. I agree. Though I'm not usually one for the concrete jungle of New York, I'm enjoying our quality time together. It's been months since it was only us, Artemis replied. Like her sister, she was dressed in casual mortal clothes, giving up her usual silver parka and camouflage pants. Her lieutenant, Zoe, could handle looking after the hunt for an afternoon and had her utmost trust to keep the girls in line. I would give anything to stay away from Olympus right now. Agreed. Hera is on the warpath again, and I have no desire to be in her way. Athena replied. Her last memory of the queen was watching the beautiful woman storming towards Zeus's temple, the earth cracking beneath her sandals and her eyes radiating godly power. She didn't need to be the goddess of wisdom to understand what was happening. Whenever Hera found out Zeus had cheated on her again, all of Olympus fled from the incoming war zone. Nothing good came from an argument between the king and queen, and no god or goddess had any desire to get wrapped up in the quarrel. Even Hestia would slip away and make herself scarce. Despite their feelings on the matter, the Olympian daughters of Zeus couldn't fault Hera for her outbursts and shouting matches with her husband. Hera's temper was legendary. People wonder why we remain virgins and refuse to take husbands. Case in point, Artemis joked, pointing up to the sky, and making her sister laugh. Seeing Zeus's volatile marriage to Hera would turn most people off of the concept of marriage. When one half of the married couple was not as committed as the other, then it made said marriage redundant in their eyes. From what they could gather by the volatile argument Zeus and Hera got into on the winter solstice, Zeus had fathered a little girl somewhere in California 3 years ago, and the mother had brought her to Manhattan. Her name was Talia, named after one of the muses, and was the first child born to their father since before World War II. Their father and their uncles had vowed to never sire another demigod. It was their effort to avoid the next great prophecy from coming to fruition. No one expected the vow to last, and unsurprisingly, Zeus was the first one to give in to his lust. The king of the gods had no luck when it came to keeping it in his pants, and his willpower towards beautiful women was weak. It seemed to be a trait that ran in their immortal family. They weren't sure what happened to the pair, but they were turned away at the door of the Empire State Building by the guard. The chill of the December month nipped at their skin, though the feeling didn't bother the pair of goddesses as it did to mortals. They'd walk the streets for a couple of hours, conversing like they would with complete comfortability with each other. It was a couple of days after the winter solstice, and the mortal holiday Christmas had been days earlier. The streets were bustling with people, filled with mortals taking advantage of the post-Christmas deals. Mortals were very focused on having the latest product of just about anything and everything in today's era. They wondered if Aphrodite had something to do with that. They wouldn't put it past the goddess of love. Speaking of the goddess of love, the daughters of Zeus ensured they weren't followed by the daughter of Uranus, spreading their essence throughout the world, making it harder for anyone to locate them. Aphrodite had a habit of showing up in the middle of their sisterly days out, taking over completely and forcing them to go to the places she wanted to go and do the things she wanted to do. While Athena could tolerate being around Aphrodite, the day would usually end up with Artemis and Aphrodite getting in an argument. It would always start with Aphrodite throwing an offhanded comment her way, and Artemis taking it as an insult. On more than one occasion, Athena had to physically restrain the goddess of the moon, and call upon Hestia to take Aphrodite back to Olympus before the two goddesses went at it. In terms of fighting capabilities, Artemis was the superior fighter in every way and was one of Olympus's best fighters. However, Aphrodite could be deceptively cunning, and being the youngest daughter of Ouranos, she boasted greater raw power than both of them. A battle between love and the moon could only result in utter chaos on a global scale. I'm feeling hungry. We could see if it's safe to return to Olympus? I bet we could convince Aunt Hestia to whip us up something? Artemis asked, a gleam in her eye. No one loved their aunt's cooking more than Artemis. Athena thought about it. I could go for something, but let's stay in the city for now. I have no desire to run into Hera or father. We'll be there for hours if they try to talk about their problems with us. Agreed. Do you have anywhere in mind? Not particularly. Perhaps we could, Athena started, but stopped when something caught her eye. What's that? Artemis hummed, turning in the direction Athena was looking in. They were somewhere in the West Village, and her sister's attention was solely on the small building that stood on the corner of 90th Bedford Street. It looked like any other building in the West Village, but the front of the restaurant on the ground floor stood out next to the gray-colored stone. In particular, the front of the building was made mostly out of glass but was met by a bright orange frame and door that stood in the center of the building. An open sign hung behind the glass door, and across the frame sat the name of the establishment, the Fox's Den. The Fox's Den? I've never heard of such a place. Neither have I, and I know every building and store in New York like the back of my hand. It must be new, Athena said back, her curiosity piquing. Shall we? Artemis made a motion with her hand. Lead the way, sister. Lead she did, with the two goddesses making their way towards the Fox's Den, interest piquing their thoughts. Well, for Athena at least. Artemis, on the other hand, was just hungry. She felt like she could eat course after course right now. A bell went off when they walked through the door, a shroud of warmth blanketing over them and making the sisters hum in content. It was well lit and open and appeared bigger than either anticipated. Along the wall on the right were a couple of booths, while more than a dozen round tables with comfy-looking chairs scattered across the room and next to the windows. A counter stood at the side with a swinging door leading into another room behind it, with a glass cabinet sat next to it. Inside, Artemis spied cakes and other delicacies of all shapes lined up neatly in multiple rows. The smell of rich and freshly made pastries wafted through the room, accompanied by a mix of coffee and chocolate. The delightful aroma made both women shiver in delight, reminding them of Aunt Hestia's treats back on Olympus. They quickly realized it was more of a cafe diner than a restaurant, but neither looked like they minded. Will this do? Athena asked, and tried not to laugh when she found her sister staring into the glass cabinet, her face pressing against the glass. Despite her reputation, Artemis was a child goddess at heart. It all looks amazing, Artemis whispered, admiring the delicate frosting that coated the carrot cake. Athena leaned down next to her and had to admit they all look amazing. Sometimes, it amazed her at the handiwork of mortals. While she wasn't known for possessing as strong of a sweet tooth as Artemis, she liked to treat herself every now and again with something sweet. Thank you for the compliment. Athena's eyes trailed away from the sweet treats and found an amused young man looking back at her from over the counter. His chin rested in his palm, and a big grin sat on his face. Most would never dare to lean so close to her, much less Artemis, but it wasn't like he knew who they were. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Artemis tense up, and her facial expression turned colder than before. Her silver eyes bore into the man's blue ones with quick intensity, as if silently telling him not to come any closer. Her silver eyes gently glowed in warning, though only enough for Athena to notice. To the man's credit, he didn't look affected. He looked more amused if anything by Artemis and reached behind the counter and pulled out 2 menus. Here, these are for you both. Take your pick where you would like to sit, and I'll be with you shortly. He straightened up, getting rid of the grin and giving the goddesses a polite smile in return. Thank you, Athena politely replied, and led Artemis away by the wrist to a nearby table by the window, whispering, "Stop glaring." Artemis shook her head, "Sorry. He surprised me, that's all. I didn't realize someone was behind the counter." Well, you were close to drooling over the carrot cake he had in there. I can't blame you, Athena teased, silently laughing as Artemis's cheeks had a tinge of gold wash over them in embarrassment. Not a word, Artemis replied, giving her sister a pointed look before both opened up their menus. The first thing that caught their attention was the variety. There was a lot to choose from: far more than other cafe diners they visited. Some of the choices were unique to witness for this type of establishment. Looking around, the room was half full, and Athena gazed across the tables to see what people were eating. Most were drinking coffee, which didn't surprise her, but she spied a couple of meals. In the corner, she saw a gentleman eating eggs Benedict, and by the moans coming from his mouth, he was enjoying his food a great deal. Looking over her menu, she failed to hide her smile when she looked at her sister. Artemis looked lost in the options, her silver eyes twinkling. If Athena was betting a person, she bet her sister was devouring the options in the dessert and cake section. When a few minutes passed, the man from the counter appeared by the table, a small notebook in his hand. No longer standing behind the counter, Athena and Artemis got a good look at him. If they had to guess, he looked the same age as Athena in her current form, somewhere in his mid-20s. He was blonde with bright azure eyes. His skin was tanned and looked like he belonged on a beach somewhere in California. He was tall, around the same height as Apollo and Hermes in their mortal forms, and was built lean. He was dressed in smart casual wear, with dark jeans and a white shirt, and around his waist was a black apron with the logo of the diner on the front in orange. At first glance, they thought he was a son of Apollo since he had the typical traits of their brother's demigod children. However, getting a sense of the man, they couldn't sense any godly connection that a demigod typically had. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Fox's Den. My name is Naruto, it's nice to meet you both, he introduced and glanced at Artemis. I'm sorry if I startled you earlier. Artemis narrowed her eyes up at the man but saw no ill will in his gaze. It's fine, but you didn't startle me. I was just engrossed in your selections in the cabinet, that's all. I see. Thank you for the compliment, though. I'm glad you liked what you saw. His words sounded sincere, and Artemis couldn't sense him playing any game. He didn't appear bothered by their beauty, unlike others in the room who kept glancing at them from the corners of their eyes. It wasn't every day two beautiful women of their standard walked into a place like this. Perhaps he would be tolerable. Did the owner make them all? She asked, nodding in the direction of the cabinet. Most of them, yes. Some came from the suppliers, but most of them are from my hands. He admitted. You're the owner? I am. Artemis didn't say much else. He felt her gaze linger on him before it slipped back to the menu. He took that as his cue to move on and turned to Athena. Naruto, you say? Athena asked, leaning back on her chair and appearing amused by his name. Her gray eyes sparkled with curiosity. It's rare to meet someone with a Japanese name, and yet doesn't appear to hold any ties to Japan. He laughed. I guess you could say my parents had a flair for exotic names. I see that. I must say, your menu is unique. It's not like other menus you see for a cafe diner like this one. Aden mentioned, any reason for that? She didn't know what she expected for him to say, but she didn't expect him to shrug. Not really. I'm fortunate enough that I've traveled the world and learned all types of different delicacies each country has to offer. I did think about creating a restaurant, but I've always preferred cafe diners. I find them to be more intimate and gives you more of a chance to get to know the people that visit. Athena nodded. Did you ever get a chance to visit Greece? I happen to be Greek myself. Emporo, kai breka ton chrono mo sten elata poly eucharisto. I can, and I found my time very enjoyable. Both Athena and Artemis looked surprised at his sudden language change. It wasn't often they met someone in New York who could speak Greek. It wasn't a language most people chose to learn, unlike French or Spanish. Getting over her surprise, Athena gave him an appraising look. I'm impressed. You speak well, and fluently. Thank you. It took a long time, but I finally managed to catch on. He replied, before clicking the top of his pen, are you both ready to order? I think so, Artemis muttered, giving her sister a pointed look before looking back at the blonde. I'll take a hot chocolate, with a slice of the carrot cake. Could I also have a dash of vanilla in my drink, please? Absolutely. He replied, before adding, would you like whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles on your hot chocolate? I would, yes. I'll take a latte, please. Like my sister, I'll have a dash of vanilla in my drink, and may I ask, what is your special dessert of the day? Athena asked. Her interest peaked when she saw that little nugget on the menu. Of course. The speciality today is a lemon curd Italiano semifreddo. He told her and failed to hide his smile when he saw her eyes sparkle. She liked the sound of that. That sounds wonderful. I'll have that, please. Naruto nodded and wrote down the order. Absolutely. You're in luck, we ran out an hour ago, but I've got the next batch almost ready. It will take about 10 minutes if you don't mind waiting. It's proved to be very popular today. That would be fine. Athena nodded and watched him walk away. When he walked back behind the counter, she turned to her sister and noticed her silver eyes gazing straight at her. What? I didn't say anything. No, but you look like you want to say something. It's nothing. I'm just noticing how chummy you were with the man. Athena rolled her eyes and scoffed. I was merely caught off guard by the way he spoke Greek. It's not every day someone in New York can speak fluent Greek. If he can learn a second language and open up his own business, it means he's got one of these. Athena poked the side of her head, plus he's the only one not leering in our direction, which is nice. I swear, if that man in the corner licks his lips in my direction one more time, I will throw this knife straight into his eye. She picked up the knife and toyed with it between her fingers. You know I would. Oh, I know you would, sister. Athena laughed, plucking the knife out of her sister's hand and putting it back on the table. The last thing she wanted was her sister to make a scene. Artemis huffed and tried to look annoyed at her sister, but started to laugh along with Athena as her sister gently kicked her under the table. We should do this more often. It's nice to get away from everyone. I agree. It's not like my hunters are incapable of looking after themselves once a week. I think once a week would be lovely. It wasn't long before they were interrupted by the blonde barista, who placed their drinks on the table in front of them. Both goddesses looked impressed with their orders and recognized the signs of someone taking care and pride in their work. Artemis did her best to keep her face from drooping as the delightful smell of her hot chocolate wafted around her nose. It smelled just like the hot chocolate Hestia would prepare for her. Athena had a similar expression on her face, wrapping her hand around the warm mug. When he placed Artemis's carrot cake in front of her, the goddess licked her lips, her sweet tooth craving for the treat. While Naruto prepared Athena's order, the two quietly drank their drinks, both relaxing into their seats as the taste touched their lips. Both let out a sigh of delight, impressed by their orders. It was easy to make a bad drink, but it was difficult to make a great one. So far, they would give the barista credit where credit was due. However, when Artemis had the first bite of her carrot cake, Athena couldn't help but giggle as her sister started demolishing the baked good. I take it the cake is good? She asked, but didn't get an answer. Her sister was too engrossed with the cake to reply, her mouth too full to form words. A thumbs up would suffice. When he returned, he was surprised to find both Artemis's mug empty and her plate void of any cake. Wow, I guess you liked it, huh? He said, before motioning to her nose. You have a little something on your nose. It was whipped cream from her drink. Artemis's eyes widened and swiped at her nose with her palm. She stared at her sister with irritation, hissing, I had whipped cream on my nose. Why didn't you tell me? Athena laughed to herself, I thought you'd realize eventually. She teased, before noticing the plate in his hand, for me? He nodded, for you. I hope you enjoy. Let me know if I can get you anything else. He told them and started to leave before he saw Artemis looking his way. Can I get you another drink? Same again, please. Drink and cake, she said, making him smile and head back to the counter. She looked at her sister and noticed her looking down at the plate, her fork in hand. Artemis wasn't one to praise a mortal often, especially a male mortal. However, she had to admit the lemon curd Italiano semifreddo he made looked divine. It looked like something you'd find in high-class mortal society. Hell, it was something she imagined Hera serving at her temple. Well, aren't you going to try it? I want to, but I feel like it would be a shame to ruin it, Athena whispered, admiring the delicate work that must have come with making it. She was no incredible chef like Hestia, Hera, or grandmother Rhea, but Athena occasionally liked to dabble in the kitchen the mortal way. She found there was something therapeutic about cooking, and she understood why so many mortals took it upon themselves to learn. It must have taken him years of practice to achieve such quality of work. It took a moment, but slowly Athena dug her fork into the lemon curd. The texture was light and fluffy, and she watched it jiggle around as she brought it up to her mouth. Taking a bite, Artemis watched as Athena fell back against her chair, her rhythmic breathing making her sister lean forward in anticipation. Judging by the expression on her sister's face, the dessert had gone over well. Her composed elder sister rarely let her cool visage slip, always retaining a mask of dignity that kept her true feelings behind closed doors. Athena wasn't the kind of goddess that wore her feelings on her sleeve, but Artemis was one of the few that could see behind that visage. It was always a pleasant experience for the goddess of the moon to see her composed sister drop all pretenses and enjoy something for what it was. Then, out of nowhere, Athena let out a loud moan of delight that caught everyone's attention. Okay, that might have taken it a step too far. The whole room fell quiet, and every mortal within the establishment, male and female, gaped and blushed in Athena's direction. Artemis couldn't stop the flush of gold from lacing her cheeks. She gawked at her sister, looking between her and the plate. Even she wasn't that bad. It sounded so ual. Athena. What in the name of Hades was that? Coming to her senses, Athena couldn't stop her eyes from widening. It's not what you think. That was a lie, and she knew it. The moment she realized what she had just done, Athena brought up her free hand up to her mouth in shock horror. She didn't dare look around the room at the gaping mortals, but the blonde owner was in her viewpoint, and she could see his surprise and disbelief. I can't believe I just did that, she thought. Never in her more than 4,000 years of existence had she ever publicly done something so candid. What made it worse was doing it in public. What the hell is wrong with me? She hid her face, the embarrassment worse than the time she tried to play the flute in front of the other gods. When he walked back over, Athena didn't dare look him in the eye. After he provided Artemis with her second round of orders, he stopped and whispered to Athena, "I'm glad you enjoyed it." He smiled politely, and before she could reply, he walked away. Oh God, what must he have been thinking? Hey, Blondie, he stopped and turned around, and everyone looked towards an older woman who was sat a few tables over. She pointed at Athena, "I'll have what she's having." Athena groaned and hid her face in her hands. She wished the earth would swallow her up for eternity. What a day. When the last customer left the fox's den, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as swapped the open sign to close. Seeking the comfort of the nearest chair, he finally had a moment to put his feet up and let the day wash over him. Whoever thought running a business would be stressful? Not him, that's for sure. Other people made it look so easy. Not to mention, the movies made it look like a piece of cake. He could with all confidence say that it was not easy. Catching Tora the cat on a D-rank mission was easier. However, as stressful as the job was, this was the path he chose to acclimate into modern-day life. As it turned out, he was very good at it. Cooking and baking had always been a hobby of his, and something he found therapeutic. Feeding fulfilled a survival need for all living creatures, and the feeling of fulfillment came not only from the good of the act of giving but also the fact that we have helped, in some form. Cooking for others helps bond human beings to loved ones and fellow humans. At least, that's how he saw it. There was also the fact that people loved cake and coffee. Both played huge parts in humanity's daily life that it seemed like a given. Rubbing his forehead with his forearm, he clapped his hands together. Alright guys, you know what to do. The door that led to the kitchen in the back room swung open, and 3 of his shadow clones marched out in a single file, giving the original Naruto a salute as they started the evening's cleanup. The evening had been a busy one with the post-Christmas rush. A lot of families had stopped by and spent the majority of the evening, as well as couples of all ages enjoying the post-Christmas bliss and exploring the post-Christmas deals throughout the city. Perhaps he should have opened up in the new year like he originally intended. At least, that way, he could ease into modern life a little easier, without having to deal with the Christmas holidays, and all it brought with it. Humanity sure had changed. Though, he did notice the festive and seasonal beverages went over a treat with his customers, and he was already thinking about what to do once January arrived. Humanity sure had a sweet tooth. Well, at least no one has complained as of yet. Everything seems to have gone over well. With that thought, his mind turned to a memory from earlier that day. The image of the 2 beautiful sisters that entered his establishment crossed his mind. Both women were equally as pleased with their orders, though one was certainly more vocal than the other. Naruto had almost dropped the other woman's order when the moan of pure delight reached his ears. He was no blushing virgin, but the fact remained it caught him by surprise. He was aware food could be an aphrodisiac, but he didn't think it was to that high of a degree. The sisters had stayed for an hour after that, with the one with gray eyes remaining silent for the remainder of their stay, too embarrassed to say another word, while the other demolished another 2 servings of hot chocolate and carrot cake. Where the auburn-haired sister put it all, he didn't know, but it was impressive to watch. Anything he put in front of her vanished within minutes. Not since Elagabalus of Rome had he seen someone devour his culinary wonders with such gusto. Heck, even Elvis in his later years had some form of restraint. What a peculiar pair of women they were. He hoped they came back again soon. Watching his clones wipe down the tables, and take the empty plates and cups to the back, he stood up and stretched his back, humming in wonder as he felt those necessary pops in his back. Taking the broom out of the closet, he got to work in doing his part before heading home for the night and doing it all over again tomorrow. "Athena, come on, we need to hurry," Artemis called out, her patience wearing thin as she paced around Athena's library. "I'll be a moment more. Just wait one more minute, Artemis. You said that 5 minutes ago. Don't you understand time is of the essence?" The response the goddess of the moon received back was a delicate laugh from her sister, accompanied by the sound of one of Athena's many rolling ladders connected to the hundreds, possibly thousands of bookcases that housed Athena's books. If one was to imagine what the personal library belonging to the goddess of wisdom looked like, all one had to do was imagine the New York Public Library, and then magnify it many times over. Only then would someone begin to imagine how endless and ever-growing it appeared to those who were not the goddess herself. Even Artemis, after thousands of years of visiting her sister in her temple on Mount Olympus, still required the aid of Glaucus, Athena's companion, to navigate her way through. If it were any other occasion, then Artemis would be in a more patient mood. However, it had been 3 weeks since their last outing together, and Artemis had been counting down the minutes for their next trip to her new favorite spot in the city. Their plan to spend sisterly time together once a week hit a pair of road bumps called Zeus and Hera, with the two elder gods pulling them away the moment they returned from their last outing weeks ago. Neither Athena nor Artemis had much time to spare after that. When they weren't fulfilling their duties to their godly domains, they were on Olympus, aiding their aunts in playing peacekeeper between the king and queen. It was frustrating to no end, but neither could find the right opportunity to slip away without being noticed. Now, 3 weeks on, some form of normalcy was beginning to return. Although Zeus was still forbidden from entering Hera's temple, the queen had finally ceased in stirring up a shouting match with her husband. In everyone's minds, the month of June couldn't come quick enough. Pacing within Athena's temple, the goddess of the moon knew why Athena was stalling. Her embarrassment from their first visit was still fresh in their mind, and Artemis was well aware her sister did not do well with embarrassing situations, especially when she was at the center of it. For what must have been the first time in her immortal life, Artemis was looking forward to delicious food that was made by a member of the opposite. Who knew miracles could happen? "I swear to Hades, Athena, if you don't hurry up I'm leaving without you. Don't you understand she could appear at any moment? She's done it before. Fine, fine, I'm coming." True to her words, the sounds of Athena's rolling ladder grew louder, and the goddess of wisdom appeared on Artemis's right field of vision. She was stood on the mid-step, carrying half a dozen books tucked between her arms. To Artemis's relief, Athena was already dressed for their outing to the mortal world, her dark hair neatly tied up in a high ponytail. Though it only took a click of their fingers to change their attire, the younger of the two goddesses wasn't willing to waste another second. "I can finish these later. Let's go before you wear down my floor with your constant pacing." Athena had barely stepped off the ladder and discarded her books when she felt her sister grab a hold of her wrist and proceed to drag her out of her temple. "Honestly, Artemis, I'm more than capable of walking by myself." Athena didn't get a response back. She quickened her pace, bringing her level with her younger sister, and noticed her silver eyes darting between bookcases. "You don't remember the way out, do you? You keep changing the layout. Just stick to one design and keep to it." A laugh escaped Athena, before gently escaping Artemis's grip and taking the lead between the two sisters. "Follow me." Having designed the latest layout of her library, she could understand why other members of her family found themselves lost within her temple. An underlying rule on Olympus was that gods and goddesses don't teleport directly into each other's temples. Their temples were like their own personal and private space, a place they could escape from the world, and from the crazier members of their family. However, despite the no teleporting rule, it didn't stop the more annoying members from waltzing through the front doors like they owned the place. Artemis was one of the few Athena gave express permission to enter her temple, knowing her sister would not exploit or betray her trust. "You need to make a map of this place. It would make life a lot easier," Artemis muttered, though she perked up when she saw the exit. "What? And run the risk of Apollo or Hermes getting their hands on it? Not a chance. Their younger brothers, Hermes in particular, could be notorious pranksters if the chance arose. The two male gods were arguably each other's best friend despite their rough start when the god of messengers stole Apollo's cattle. Since then, the two were as thick as thieves, and two of Olympus's biggest playboys. The idea of them getting a hold of her library's layout sent shivers down her spine. Her spear would run with godly ichor if the pair ever tried anything. As soon as they were out, Artemis's pace quickened as they headed for the golden doors to Athena's temple. "Come on," she ushered, trying to get her sister to walk faster. "I don't know where that damn Aphrodite is, but I don't want her catching us. I don't know how she does it, but she's sneakier than some of the deadliest creatures I hunt. She has this habit of appearing at the most inconvenient moment." All right, Athena replied, her heels clicking against her temple floor. "I don't think I've seen you this excited in a long time. That mortal has certainly left an impression on you. Don't read too much into it." Artemis insisted, her eyes never leaving the set of golden doors as they got closer. "His establishment provides a warm and comforting aura, and it's nice to be in the presence of a male that didn't spend the entire time leering at us. It's a refreshing feeling." A dusting of golden ichor washed over her cheeks. His food and hot chocolate were nice too. A bark of laughter escaped Athena. "I think we both know you liked it more than that. What were the words you used after we left?" Athena tapped her chin. "Oh, that's right. It feels like someone poured ambrosia and nectar all over our taste buds, and covered us in a warm blanket." "I don't remember saying anything like that." "Funny, because I do." "Why yes, well," Artemis stuttered, as she pressed her hand on the doors and pushed it open. "At least I didn't let out a loud and ual moan after a single bite of lemon curd." This time it was Athena's turn to splutter in surprise. It was not a ual moan." "Yes, it was." "No, it wasn't. Besides, how would you know? Don't turn this around on me." The two sisters narrowed their eyes at one another. Though close, the sisters did have the odd tiff, as rare as it was. As Artemis prepared to throw another barb her sister's way and Athena was trying to come up with an excuse for her past action, the rich smell of perfume hit the pair of goddesses like a ton of bricks. Their bodies froze and slowly turned their heads in the direction of the door where a haze of pink smoke enveloped the doorway to Athena's temple. Neither could say a word as the very person they were trying to avoid being caught by appeared in all her stunning glory. Currently possessing baby blue eyes that shined as bright as sapphires, with bouncy dark chocolate curls that hung down to the middle of her back, the goddess of love was midway through knocking on the door when she noticed Athena and Artemis standing in her way. Aphrodite blinked in surprise, but soon became a bundle of joy as she clapped her hands together, seemingly oblivious to the frozen stares she was getting. "Oh, how wonderful. I was about to come and find you both, but you've saved me the trouble," she said. Reaching forward, neither Athena nor Artemis could do anything as Aphrodite looped an arm through each of their arms, and marched them out onto the streets of Olympus. "Let's have a girls' day. Just the three of us. Won't that be terrific?" The goddess of love wasn't giving either of her fellow goddesses a chance to back out. This was happening whether they wanted it or not. As their senses returned to them, Artemis shot Athena a look of betrayal as she realized the predicament she was now stuck in. "I told you this would happen." All Athena could do was sigh, and thank the fates that Aphrodite hadn't appeared seconds earlier. Stretching his arms out in front of him, the blonde owner of the Fox's Den found himself leaning against the counter as he stared out the window and across the street. Trying to repress a yawn from breaking out, he turned and looked across the inside of the den, taking in the people that were visiting. It had been a slow day compared to the last couple of weeks, but with Christmas over and children returning to school and adults returning to work, a routine was beginning to form through his weekdays. Saturday was always going to busy, while Sunday he was only open for half a day. Even he needed a break and time to rest. Boy, the last hour is dragging. Right now, he was in the middle of the slow period. The afternoon rush during lunch had proven to be one of his business periods of the day, some opting to stay in while others chose to take their food away with them and find a quiet spot to eat in solitude away from the bustling streets. It was a few minutes past 2, and the people slowly filtered out until the room was only a third of the way full. It wasn't that he wasn't enjoying the peace, but there was something about the pressure from the swarm of people all coming in at once that got his blood going. In the back room, he knew his clones were hard at work. At least, that's what he was hoping anyway. Even after all this time, his clones still had a habit of doing things their way when they got antsy, but those moments had become few and far between. These days, they did as they were told, and he was thankful for it. Noticing a hand waving at him from one of the tables next to the window, he smiled and walked over with his notepad and pen in his apron pocket. "Another black coffee for you, ma'am?" he asked, watching as the young blonde woman stared down at the papers spread out on the table. From what he gathered, the young woman was in the middle of her training to become a teacher. Math, if he remembered right. She'd come in 2 hours ago, during the lunchtime rush, and had yet to leave. Every time he looked her way, he found the woman biting down on her pencil, leaving tiny grooves in the wood. It looked like she was preparing for an exam if the papers were anything to go by, with notes and scribbles covering the blank spaces. "Yes, please." She picked the mug up and held in his direction, her eyes never leaving the paper. "How are you getting on?" "I can't say math was ever one of my fortes. It's going fine. I'd be better with another cup of coffee though." One of his eyebrows went up, but he said nothing. Instead, he took the mug and went through with her next order. Despite professional courtesy, a small part of him was tempted to add a dash of chili sauce to the drink. Rude. As he fulfilled the order, little did he know, at that same moment a street over from the fox's den, the three goddesses of Olympus converged on its location. "No, Macy's is that way." Aphrodite pointed in the direction opposite to the way they were walking. "I saw the most beautiful pair of Gucci heels that would look great on you, Artemis. Every woman needs a pair of knockout heels." Why couldn't Artemis understand everything she was trying to do was ultimately for the betterment of the moon goddess? "Let me help you." Biting back a curse, Artemis pulled the struggling love goddess along the pavement. "And I told you, I don't need a stupid pair of heels. I'll take a pair of sandals or combat boots at any time of the week. Besides, Athena and I already made plans before you stuck your nose in." "But we no." "Then, how no." Sighing, Athena turned and looked at the annoyed expressions on both goddesses' faces, though each for different reasons. "Aphrodite, you don't have to stay. You can go, and Artemis and I will continue our day without you." Huffing in annoyance, Aphrodite yanked her arms out of Artemis's grip and crossed them against her chest. A pout appeared on her face, but she knew there was nothing she could do to change her fellow Olympians' minds. "Fine, but this place had better be as good as you're making it out to be." "It will be. It better." Aphrodite watched as Athena's and Artemis both suddenly stopped and stared up, coercing her to do the same. When she did, she found herself looking at the most sickly shade of orange she could imagine, with a name written across it, "The Fox's Den?" She turned her attention back to the two goddesses. "This is where you wanted to go. If you want to go to a café, I know a great little place in Paris. It's a terrace café at the western end of the Ile de la Cité." "No, this will do fine," Athena retorted, not allowing Aphrodite to usurp their day off. Before Aphrodite could reply, Athena cut her off. "Aphrodite, trust me when I say you're going to like it here." Opening the door, Athena eagerly walked inside, the bell ringing off and followed closely by Artemis, whose tongue was poking between her lips when she spied the cakes through the window. Realizing it wasn't going her way no matter what, Aphrodite relented and followed after them. Fine then, she hoped it would be worth it. The second she stepped through the doors, her negative thoughts melted away as a wave of warmth covered her body like a warm comforter, and the rich smell of chocolate and coffee enveloped her senses. The delightful aroma forced Aphrodite to stop in her tracks and take a moment to bask in the glow she was feeling. Her eyes hovered across the room, taking everything in from the shade of the walls to the fixtures hanging from the ceiling. "Oh, how quaint." She clapped her hands together, eliciting an eye roll from Artemis, though Athena seemed pleased at the reaction. "It smells divine in here. I can see why you wanted to come here." Skipping forward, she mimicked Artemis's actions from the first visit and pressed her dainty hands against the glass cabinet. "These look delicious." Proving her point, she licked her lips and tapped her fingers on the glass. As Olympus's leading authority on anything relating to chocolate and sweets, she was enjoying what she saw and smelled. "Those eclairs look to die for." "Welcome back," the three heard. Looking over the counter, Aphrodite found herself locking eyes with another pair of bright blue eyes as Naruto reappeared after returning from the back room. He wiped his brow and smiled at the three women, and nodded his head towards Aphrodite. "And you brought a friend? It's nice to meet you. Hello, handsome. Athena and Artemis's decision didn't seem like a bad one anymore. She understood why they were so eager. She would be too if he was the one serving them. Blonde hair and blue eyes. Tall and lean. Nice complexion and works in a cute cafe. Mama likes. The goddess of wisdom smiled at the blonde, ignoring the looks Aphrodite was giving the owner, and watched as he gathered 3 menus from behind the counter. To Aphrodite's surprise, even Artemis wore the tiniest smile on her face. Gone was the usual cold or indifferent mask she'd seen her fellow goddess wear when in the presence of a male mortal. What in the world? It's nice to see you again, Naruto, Athena said, accepting one of the menus as he held them out to the 3 goddesses. Not wanting Aphrodite to be aware of her nerves on returning to the establishment, Athena buried those feelings away and behaved as she typically would. We hope to come again sooner, but responsibilities tend to get in the way. You know how it goes. I sure do, and don't worry about it. He waved it off. Your table from before is free if you want it. Or would you like to sit elsewhere? Scanning the room, it was Artemis that spoke. May we take a booth? She pointed to the back of the room, where all the booths were currently available. Sure, make yourselves at home. I'll be over in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Heading towards the table, the trio of goddesses weaved their way through the interior, ignoring the stares they were receiving from the other patrons. Aphrodite couldn't help but give a wink to a cute-looking man sitting on his own close to the restroom and giggled when he nearly choked on his drink. Slipping into one of the available booths, Artemis claimed one side, while Athena and Aphrodite shared the other. I think I'm beginning to see why you girls like it here, Aphrodite said, making herself comfortable and slipping off her jacket, revealing a snow-white cardigan that showed off her perfect form and curves. The owner is a bit of a hunk, don't you think? Neither Athena nor Artemis replied, and soon, Aphrodite found herself holding back a giggle, amused at how serious they looked as they read the menu. What are you thinking, Artemis? Carrot cake again? Artemis shook her head. I'm not sure. It was heavenly last time, but I feel like I should try one of the others. Red velvet, maybe? There was too many to choose. That's a good one. Though, it would be hard to beat Aunt Hestia's red velvet cake from 7 years ago during the summer solstice. That's what I was thinking, but I'm tempted. I think I'll pick a hot chocolate again, though. Artemis looked up from her menu, her silver eyes staring into Athena's gray ones. Are you going with the lemon curd again? Aphrodite noticed the thick gulp by the goddess of wisdom and watched her bring the menu up close to her face. And no, not this time. Besides, that was a special of the day. I doubt you will have it again. I might go for something a little different. Watching the back and forth, Aphrodite's lips formed a tiny O shape, listening to her fellow goddesses converse. She wanted to know what the fuss was all about. They talk as if it's the best thing in the world. Like many of Olympus's goddesses, Aphrodite had wined and dined in the finest establishments humanity had to offer. Whether it was the high society life of the rich and famous in Hollywood, New York, Paris, or London, and being catered to by the best chefs that ever lived, Aphrodite couldn't understand why Athena and Artemis were getting lost in the menu the way they were. Surely it wasn't that good? It was just a cafe diner in the middle of West Village. They weren't even on the Upper East Side. Not to mention no one in the world could compete with the delicious delicacies that Hestia, Hera and Mother Rhea were known to create. It just wasn't possible. Opening up her menu, she scanned through the first page before her eyes widened. Wow! Look at that menu. There was so much to choose. Her favorite cafe in Paris didn't have a menu anything close to this. Oh, today was going to be a good day. The table fell silent, each goddess finding themselves as wrapped up in what to choose as the other. Beneath the table, all 3 tapped their shoes against the hardwood floor as the choices ran through their minds. None of the 3 Olympians looked at each other, their eyes glued to the options. Athena had her eyes narrowed, Artemis was eagerly licking her lips, and Aphrodite was busy biting a nail. What to choose? As expected, after a couple of minutes passed, all 3 felt Naruto appear by their table, his notebook and pen in hand, and giving them all his trademark smile. Thanks for waiting. Are the 3 of you ready to order? Looking around the table, the blonde owner turned to Athena, deciding to start with her. Straightening her back, Athena cleared her voice. I believe so. She looked at the pair and saw them nod, though Artemis still looked a tad unsure. I'll take a latte please. Though instead of vanilla, may I have a dash of cinnamon this time? She watched him nod his head and write the order down, and I remember seeing someone with eggs Benedict the last time I was here. I'll have one of those, please. Absolutely. Those are all great choices. When he turned to Artemis, the goddess appeared to have finally made her mind up. I'll take a hot chocolate, and this time, I'll get a slice of the chocolate coconut cake. Sure, what kind of hot chocolate would you like? I'm sorry? Artemis looked at the man in surprise and watched him scratch the back of his head. Oh, right. Sorry, I forgot you haven't visited in a few weeks. I've added a couple of different types of hot chocolate, besides the standard type you'd expect, and I'm waiting on the new menus to arrive. Would you like to hear them? Artemis said nothing and nodded. New types of hot chocolate? She hadn't prepared for this. Well, right now I have 6 types, but I'm planning on bringing in more over time. Naruto held out his fingers. We've got regular, rocky road, mint chocolate, white chocolate, salted caramel and orange chocolate. Each flavor made her eyes gleam, though one, in particular, stood out. I'll take the salted caramel. You got it. And don't forget the whipped cream and sprinkles. I would never be so cruel, he joked. Across from Artemis, Athena smiled at her sister's eagerness. No matter how cold or intense Artemis could become when crossed, the moon goddess would always be a child at heart. Even Aphrodite, who so desperately wanted to tease the younger goddess, couldn't bring herself to do so. She looked so cute and not at all like the huntress that struck fear into monsters everywhere. When he turned to Aphrodite, the love goddess batted her eyelashes at him. I'll take strawberry milkshake please. She lifted a delicate finger and pointed to something that caught her eye. I couldn't help but notice you have a section of entremets on the menu. I do, yes. Her smile widened and leaned forward on the table. It's rare to find that type of dish outside of France done well. Most people tend to overpower one layer too much, causing the rest to suffer. You sparked my curiosity. Her hand came up and rested in her palm, purposely posing in a way that enticed most men she met. Next to her, Athena and Artemis frowned. I'm no connoisseur, but I've spent a great deal of time in Paris and around France, learning the language. So, I know how a good entremet should taste. The blonde owner listened and smiled. If it helps you in making a decision, then you should know I learned how to make entremets during my time in Paris. Aphrodite's eyes shined at that piece of information. Take your pick, and I'll make it my duty to knock your heels off. Quote, very well, challenge accepted. Winking up at him, she briefly looked across the selection before making up her mind. That one. The apple spice one, please. Good choice. After he finished noting the orders down, he bowed his head to the 3 ladies, though kept his eyes on the love goddess. Je reviendrai avec vos commandes sous peu. I will return with your orders shortly. A short gasp escaped from Aphrodite's lips as she watched him walk away. Before long, it was replaced by a smirk and gleam in her eyes that her fellow Olympians had seen one too many times. You didn't say he spoke French. This mortal got better and better by the second. Athena looked equally as surprised. I didn't know. Though he does speak Greek, and he did say he'd traveled around the world. Perhaps I should have foreseen the possibility that he could speak numerous languages by that information alone. Athena leaned back against her seat, ignoring Aphrodite's surprise, and watching him from the corner of her eye. He's a very surprising mortal. It had been some time since a mortal had piqued her interest in such a way. That was one more thing she could say that she liked about the blonde. He's might be the only male mortal I can tolerate. Artemis added, before narrowing her eyes at the love goddess, which is why I forbid you from trying to take him to your bed. What? Hey, you can't do that. Aphrodite whined, leaning forward and stared directly at the younger goddess. Besides, who's to say I would? Next to her, Athena scoffed. Don't think we don't recognize that gleam in your eyes, Aphrodite. We know how you operate. She warned, stealing her gray eyes, and I concur with Artemis. Don't get any funny ideas. Who I bring to my bed is my business. Not yours. Well, I like coming here, so I'm making it my business. Why don't you stick to your Girl Scouts, Artie? Why don't you stop corrupting every tolerable male out there? Maybe you'll notice more of them if you spoke first, and shot an arrow later. How about you close your legs for once, instead of acting like a 24/7 7-Eleven? Kick. Artemis's eyes widened, before leveling the love goddess with a glare. Did you just kick me? In response, Aphrodite did the grown-up thing and stuck her tongue out at the moon goddess. Alright, that's it. Kicking the love goddess back in return, the 2 women spent the next couple of minutes kicking and stamping each other's legs. with each swing getting harder and more creative than the last. It would have been a comical sight watching the two beautiful goddesses squabbling if Athena hadn't manipulated the mist around them. To the eyes of the mortals around them, all they were seeing was the three women conversing casually. I should have known, Athena thought, observing the two squabble like children, both amused and annoyed at the same time. She could feel a headache coming on. The two were the polar opposites of each other, and they never failed in bringing out the worst in each other. Subtly, Athena moved any cutlery away from the moon goddess. She didn't need her sister getting any creative ideas. The moment she saw Naruto returning with their orders, Athena intervened and mimicked the actions of their aunt Hestia and how she would stop the two from their petty arguments. She lurched forward and with both hands, grabbed an ear from each goddess and gave them a hard yank. Ow, hey! Before either could say another word, the returning blonde reappeared by their table. Here you go, ladies. Enjoy. Placing their drinks in front of them, he followed up the action with Artemis and Athena's food, and turned to Aphrodite, your order will be right out in a moment. Thanks, she replied, rubbing her ear and shooting a glare at Athena, who was smiling her thanks at Naruto. Once the pain in her ear passed, Aphrodite found herself gripping the straw of her milkshake. As she hoped, it was in a tall glass with whipped cream and rainbow sprinkles coating the top of the drink, and a small strawberry delicately placed on the rim. It smelled divine. Looking around the table, she found herself looking in amazement as Athena sunk into her seat, her latte cupped in one hand while the other held her fork. She looked completely and utterly at peace as she took a bite of her eggs Benedict. It was an expression she rarely saw from Athena, barring the occasions the goddesses of Olympus would commune around Hestia's hearth. Across from her, the annoyance slipped away from her occasional rival goddess, whose silver eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. Watching Artemis, she had to hold back a laugh as a mustache made of whipped cream coated her top lip, while her hand brought up a piece of her coconut cake, which looked incredible. She wanted to tease her but decided to leave it be. Puckering her lips, Aphrodite took a swig of her drink and blinked as the sweet drink enveloped her godly taste buds. It was neither too thick nor too thin, and walked that fine line between too sweet and not sweet enough. To put it bluntly, Aphrodite thought it was one of the best milkshakes of her life. Holy Mother of Rhea, that's good, she whispered, loud enough for Athena and Artemis to hear her, the former of who smirked as she enjoyed the taste of cinnamon in her latte. For the next minute, the three sat in silence, with Aphrodite swaying her legs from side to side beneath the table, her head resting in her palm as she relished in the taste of her milkshake. Oh, she was coming back for sure. She could see herself becoming a regular if everything was as good as this. She was so wrapped up with her delightful drink that she didn't even sense Naruto appear beside her and lay a plate in front of her. She was about to speak but found her words lost on her as she gazed down at the plate. Oh my, enjoy. Walking away, Athena and Artemis looked up from their dishes, staring at the love goddess as she pushed her milkshake gently to the side, her hands clasping together as she stared down at her order. Neither woman could fault since both looked as mesmerized at the sweet treat on the plate. Sat on the top of the incredible-looking orange-colored pastry was a spiral-shaped apple garnish, and cinnamon sticks delicately leaning against the garnish. Like before with the lemon curd, Athena and Artemis thought it looked like something Hera would serve at her temple. The queen of the gods only accepted the best of the best, and the apple spice entremet Aphrodite ordered looked like it belonged nowhere else. Wow, Artemis muttered. It looked amazing. It looks incredible, Aphrodite whispered, picking up her fork and digging into her sweet treat. Part of her didn't want to ruin the beauty of the dish. No one relished in beauty as she did. It was one of her domains after all. Slowly, she took a bite and fell back against her seat at the explosion of flavor. Her lips pursed together, and her fellow goddesses watched as her pupils exploded in a myriad of colors, like a kaleidoscope. I think that's one more person won over. Both Athena and Artemis froze and steadily looked up from their meals. A flush of gold dusted across their cheeks. Across the room, like it did weeks earlier, the whole room went silent, and everyone, Naruto included, stared in Aphrodite's direction. The goddess of love cared little for the reactions going on around her, too busy enjoying her godly taste buds getting overwhelmed by the flavor. Artemis almost choked on drink. Oh no. Not again. At least it wasn't me this time. Athena thought, her fork hanging in the air, watching Aphrodite dig into her meal like a woman possessed. She's worse than Artemis. Bits of mousse covered her lips, and crumbs covered the edge of her mouth. Both did nothing but watch as Aphrodite finished off the dessert in a matter of moments. If they weren't blushing from Aphrodite's reaction, they would have been impressed by how quickly she devoured the dessert. Even Naruto, who busy preparing another order, stumbled at how loud Aphrodite was being. Again? He thought. Handing the customer their drink, Naruto slowly walked over to the table. On the one hand, he was happy to see he'd won their little challenge. He'd yet to have a complaint come through his doors, and he didn't plan on starting today. On the other hand, did she have to be so vocal about it? His blue eyes gazed across to Athena, giving her a look amplified her embarrassment. I guess you two must be related too, huh? You're a lot alike, he joked. Athena shrank in her seat, her hands covering her face. Just once, she'd like to come to the fox's den without being filled with embarrassment. Hearing his voice, the goddess of love turned her head, ignoring the fact she had mousse and crumbs all over the lower half of her face, and looked at him with widened eyes. Before Athena or Artemis could say or do anything, everyone watched as Aphrodite stood up on her seat, perfectly balanced in her heels and making herself taller than the blonde. The myriad of colors was rampant in her eyes, switching from blue to green to brown, and every other color imaginable, though only her fellow Olympians could see it. Is everything okay? The blonde owner started to speak, but was silenced when she rushed forward, slamming her lips against his. His eyes widened and felt a pair of arms snake around his head, her petite fingers threading themselves through his hair and pulling him in close. He could feel her nibbling against his bottom lip, and couldn't help but place his hands on her hips. He didn't know where else to put them. He could taste the apple and cinnamon from the dessert, along with the almonds he added to the mix. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, but he could feel the shocked expressions from his other customers staring at them. The clattering of cutlery dropping was a telltale sign. Aphrodite, that's the opposite of what we told you to do. Both Athena and Artemis lurched forward and grabbed the older goddess, pulling her back and forcing her back to her seat. Artemis looked as if she wanted to wring the love goddess's neck. This was what she was afraid of. You can't help yourself, can you? Artemis hissed. Athena glared at the back of Aphrodite's head. If it was possible, the goddess of wisdom would be glaring a hole into the back of her head. Their anger only intensified when Aphrodite started giggling. She batted her eyelashes his way and blew him a kiss. Say thank you like a normal person. Don't worry ladies, I'm sure he didn't mind. She continued to giggle, ignoring the fact that Artemis looked ready to combust. She wished she had her hunting knives with her. Slowly, her giggling ceased, and the blonde owner watched as she mouthed, Merci pour le régal. Thank you for the treat. She sent a wink his way too. The surprised Naruto stood there staring at the three women, his free hand coming up and touching his lips. He could feel the sensation of her lips still on his, her tongue begging to wrestle with his. Tasting past the dessert, he detected a hint of honeysuckle and had a feeling there were smears of the woman's pink lipstick on his face. How long has it been since that happened? He honestly couldn't remember. Behind him, the bell to the fox's den rang, and Naruto took that as his cue to turn around and leave, ignoring the woman's resumed giggling. He weaved his way through the tables and chairs, ignoring the stares sent his way, and returned to his spot behind the counter, trying to control the blush on his face. Welcome to the fox's den. Letting out a yawn, Naruto rubbed his face as he tried to wipe the sleep out of his eyes. Waking up at 5 am every morning had been a struggle initially. For as long as the blonde shinobi could remember, he'd never been a morning person. From his time in the academy to his days as a member of Team 7, and even during his tenure as the 7th Hokage of Hidden Leaf Village, waking up at such an obscene time was a struggle. These days, being the owner of a cafe diner required him to open up hours before the rest of the world opened their eyes, and get everything ready for the day that lay ahead. He didn't have the luxury of Kakashi-sensei, or later on, Hinata, to wake him up anymore. He could have made a shadow clone and have the clone do it, but he knew if he did that, and remained in bed, he would do it every morning. He didn't want to fall into the trap of beginning a bad habit. It was the same reason he didn't use the Hiraishin to get to work. Besides, the walk from his home to the fox's den helped wake him up. It was Sunday, which meant he was only open until 2. After that, he planned on going home and sleeping the day away until it was time to restart his week all over again. Walking the streets at such an early time, it would always surprise him to see people much like himself, out and about already starting their day. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and the brisk chill of the air nipped at his skin, reddening his cheeks and the tip of his nose. He nodded his head at a passerby, who was heading towards a nearby ops truck as packages of all sizes were being loaded on and off with great care. Ops? That must be new. Morning. Good morning. Rounding the corner, he sniffled when the fox's den came into sight with its bright orange frame standing out amongst the dull colors of the other building. Didn't people understand if they wanted to attract the attention of the people passing by? Then what better way was there than using the brightest shade of the best color in the world? If nothing else, it would cause people to stop and look. Digging into his pockets and pulling out a key, he quickly entered the fox's den and locked the door behind him. Switching the lights on, he could still detect the lingering scent of chocolate and coffee from the day before. Shaking the cold away, he eyed up the coffee machine to warm him up as he removed his coat and hung it up in his office, which was nothing more than a little hole in the wall room where he could keep all the legal stuff and keep the computer. Crossing his fingers, he called out his trademark jutsu, Shadow Clones Jutsu. 24 Narutos appeared in front of him, falling into 3 lines of 8 and offered the original a quick-fingered salute. Alright, you all know the drill. The list of what we need to make this morning will be on the countertop. The special of the day won't be anything too fancy, but I thought we'd go with a blueberry skyr cheesecake. He watched them nod their heads. The skyr yogurt is on the top shelf. If we need any more, hurry over to Reykjavik and head to that store I frequented when last there. The one nearest to the theater house. They nodded again, forcing him to clap his hands together. Alright then. You know what to do. Let's go. Hi. One by one, the clones made their way into the kitchen, the door flapping in an endless loop as each clone passed through. Letting out another yawn, he turned around and started the process of switching the machines on, from the coffee grinder to the espresso machine, to the automatic drip coffee makers. While his clones handled the baking in the kitchen, he'd handle setting the place up in the front before joining them. While he was on his own in the front, he made himself a drink while he could. The blonde ninja was fond of a Spanish latte, though instead of sugar, he added a splash of honey. Honey was packed full of natural sweetness and energy, and in his opinion, a better option than sugar. His hands moved together with perfect fluidity thanks to constant repetition. Honey, along with a shot of espresso added to the mix, made him hum in delight as he brought the drink up to his mouth. Now that was the good stuff. When he was younger, he never imagined anything coming close to his love for ramen. However, these days he couldn't imagine a morning without some form of caffeine to start his day. He had a couple of hours before he opened his doors to the public. Once open, he estimated he'd have around 10 minutes before the first batch of customers started filing their way in, likely for a takeaway order. Wandering the earth for as long as he had, the blonde owner of the Fox's Den had become good at reading people. He knew when to talk to his customers, and when to leave them be and let them get on with their day. Disappearing once again into the back room, he returned moments later with a large cardboard box in his arms and placed it down on the counter. Unsealing the top, he got a glimpse of the inside. His new order of paper cups had arrived the day before, and like most things in his life, they were bright orange too. A majority of his customers during the morning rush took their orders away with them, and his paper cups were nothing more than the store-bought cups anyone could purchase. These new ones were ordered and designed for the Fox's Den, with a chibi-styled fox sporting 9 tails in the center drinking a coffee. There could never be too much orange in one person's life. Not to mention, he came to accept it was the little things in life that kept him going. Who knew new paper cups would sput a smile on his face? He hoped Kurama didn't mind having his silhouette as the new logo for his business. His face if he saw these. He'd be so mad. He whispered, staring at the chibi fox on the cup, and letting out a low laugh. He'd never forgive me for turning him into a cute cartoon. Knock, knock, knock. Blinking in surprise at the sound, Naruto turned around and faced the doorway, and found himself staring back at a pair of blue eyes on the other side of the glass. Stood with one hand knocking against the glass, was a man somewhere in his late 20s if he had to guess, and dressed up like a mailman, shorts and all. The man possessed dark curly hair poking out from beneath his hat, with elfish features, and looked like he was in desperate need of a good night's sleep with dark shadows forming beneath his eyes. It was even more evident when the man broke out into a yawn. The man then offered him a wave. "Hey, any chance I can come in?" Moments earlier, "We got another delivery come in. It looks like another set of packages have come in for Janice. He's requesting it for delivery at 8 a.m. sharp." Hermes heard, and noticed the heads of George and Martha come to life and turning to look at him. A loud ping followed after, and Hermes couldn't stop the groan from leaving his mouth as he watched Janice's name popped up on the itinerary. As was his every day, the god of messengers, travelers, thieves and a whole array of other domains found himself piled high with his usual responsibilities and duties. None of his Olympian brothers had ever worked the kind of hours he worked regularly. Apollo, in particular, as much as he loved his best friend and older brother, was going through his lazy season. The god of the sun worked little during the winter season, hence why the days were short and the nights long, much to the ire of his twin sister. The sun god spent his time slacking off when he should have been fulfilling his godly duties and wooing beautiful mortals and bringing them to his bed. "We just left New Rome an hour ago. What's his Janus ordering this time?" As much as Hermes wanted to do the same, his godly domains were some of the most time-consuming with the world today and left little room for him to enjoy the pleasures that came with modern society. Back in the day, it was his duty to watch over the travelers and merchants as they went on their long and arduous journeys across Greece and deliver the messages from the sky to the sea and the underworld. As one of the few gods who had permission to cross into the domains of his father and his uncles, it made his position on Olympus all the more important. These days, his domains that humanity fell under became so varied thanks to society adapting and growing as a whole, that he became the busiest Olympian out of his whole family. One positive though was that out of all the gods, Hermes felt he was the one who had the best understanding of mortals, thanks to all the time he spent mingling with them. The only ones that came close were Athena and Artemis. With today's developments, his immortal family was keeping him busier than ever. Athena and Aphrodite even had the gall to have him deliver their demigods to their mortal parents moments after their birth. You'd think that was something that needed a face-to-face conversation, but apparently, he was wrong. On the rare occasion when he didn't have to work, he often found himself stealing a page out of Apollo's book, spending the night with a woman. There was honestly no better stress relief than a good old-fashioned rumble and tumble in the bedroom, which often led to the birth of his demigod children. Speaking of his demigod children, Hermes felt a flicker of his essence pulsate a few days back somewhere out in California. It was a feeling he'd felt many times before when his demigod children were born. It turned out, a young woman that he spent the night with during the spring of last year had given birth to his latest son. If it wasn't for his hectic schedule and the laws Olympus followed, he would visit his children as often as he could. As it was, the best he could do was watch over them, and their mothers from afar and offer them aid when he could. Eyeing up the two snakes that wrapped themselves around his famous caduceus, the two let out a low hiss as they looked over the list of deliveries he kept on the monitor at all times. Looks like he ordered season 3 and 4 of CSI. Crime Scene Investigation on DVD. What? He could have just snapped his fingers and made them appear if he wanted them so bad. Throwing his hands in the air, the son of Zeus glared at the monitor. "I swear to Hades, that damn border god is doing this on purpose. Just order from Amazon, not me. We got another order coming in. This time from Dionysus." Hermes rolled his eyes. "No, no, no. I know what that drunk is trying to get a hold of." He leaned forward and deleted the incoming order with a click of his fingers. Grabbing his notepad, he wrote down a short message for the god of wine, before clicking his fingers and sending it off to the wine god's residence at Camp Halfblood. Ever since Dionysus made the mistake of chasing after a nymph that Zeus declared off limits, he'd been forced to remain sober and not touch any source of wine for 100 years, as well as run Camp Half-Blood. His punishment made his younger brother miserable. If he thinks I'm falling for his tricks, then think again. He forgets I'm the god of thieves. His brother would be angry, but he could handle Dionysus. Falling back against his seat, Hermes rubbed his eyes and couldn't stop the yawn from escaping his mouth. Gods, he was tired. The rest of his family didn't know how good they had it. "I need coffee, otherwise, I'm not going to make it." Stretching out his hand, a mug reading, "World's Best Grandma," a recent present from Apollo appeared, coffee filled to the top inside. Giving it a quick sniff, he brought it up to his lips and instantly regretted it. Rolling down the window, Hermes spat the coffee out onto the street, followed soon after by the rest of the mug. As a god, he could make almost anything appear if he willed it so. All he had to do was picture it in his mind, and will it to be. However, with food and drinks and other edible delicacies, said god had to have some skill over the art. He wasn't bad by any means and was known to treat his mortal lovers to a home-cooked meal from time to time, which made the food he conjured pretty good. His aunt Hestia and even his stepmother had given him their stamp of approval. Yet, for some reason unbeknownst to him, Hermes could never make a decent cup of coffee. This was the most ridiculous thing. No matter how hard he tried, the Olympian could not crack the code after years of practicing. It was such a mundane thing, yet he failed miserably at it. If Apollo, Ares or any of his brothers found out, they wouldn't let him live it down. Feeling someone tapping his leg, Hermes glanced over at George and Martha, the latter of whom was trying to get his attention. "What? We can afford to take a short break. Why not make a stop and get refreshments?" "Oh, and where do you suggest?" He watched as the two snakes turned to look at each other, whisper something to one another, before turning back to look at him. "How about that place up the street?" Hermes blinked. "Place up the street?" He leaned forward and squinted his eyes. It took him a moment to realize what George and Martha were trying to point out. Up the road, not even a minute walk, he spotted a light on in one of the nearby windows. Despite Apollo not yet flying his chariot through the sky, streetlights were enough to show off the orange frame that wrapped around the front of the store. "The Fox's Den?" he read, before tapping his chin. "Why does that sound familiar?" "It's the cafe Aphrodite mentioned a fortnight ago at Apollo's poker night." George hissed, as realization lit up his face. Oh, that's right. How could he forget? It was all Aphrodite went on about all night. After a while, Hermes, along with everyone else, had tuned out the love goddess, but some of what she said had filtered in. All he remembered her saying was that some hunky mortal made one of the most delicious strawberry milkshakes and dessert she'd ever tasted, and that it was so good that Olympus's most beautiful goddess rewarded the mortal with a big smooch in the middle of his establishment. It was so good that she dared to say it might be as good as the delicacies Aunt Hestia and Aunt Hera were known to create. If he remembered right, even Athena and Artemis enjoyed it. If his two elder sisters enjoyed something created by a male mortal, then he must have been good. They were notoriously picky and hard to please. Grinning, Hermes didn't hear what George and Martha said next, before waving his hand and turning his caduceus to its phone form. The Olympian god was already on his feet, closing his truck door shut with newfound energy as he marched over to the Fox's Den. "Well, let's go and see what the fuss is about." Present. Leaving the counter, the blonde owner of the Fox's Den walked closer to the door, gazing curiously at the man of the other side. "Hey, I'm not open yet, and I won't be open for a couple of hours." He pointed to the clock behind on the wall behind the counter. "Come back later, and I'll be happy to take your order." What hope he had that the guy would take his word and leave was proven false when the guy didn't move. "Aw, come on, can't you make an exception this once?" Hermes put his hands together in a prayer motion. "I've been up for hours. I need a little pick-me-up, that's all." Rolling his eyes and feeling a headache coming on, Naruto took another step closer to the door. It was too early for this. "Look, I haven't got much ready. I just walked through the door a minute ago myself. Why don't you go to Starbucks or something? I'm sure one of those is open 24/7. In response, Hermes made a face and stuck his tongue. "No way. I hate all that franchise crap. They stopped making good coffee years ago, and I hear you make a hell of a drink. I have it from a reliable source that you're one of the best in the city." "Oh? Who's this reliable source? One of his regular customers maybe?" He wondered if one of those food critics stopped by. He thought he saw one stop by a week ago, taking notes on a little notepad and looking very up themselves. Every order sent his way, Naruto put a little bit of extra care into, resulting in the guy leaving with the biggest smile on his face. It was a good feeling watching his customers leave with big smiles on their faces. Hoping to get an answer, the blonde received a wagging finger in return instead. That would be telling. I could never give up my reliable sources, but no, they had nothing but glowing reviews about this place you have." Frowning, Naruto was about to speak, before he got cut off. "You're here, and the machines are on." He pointed to the coffee machine behind the blonde and pointed to the coffee that was in Naruto's hands. "Come on, help a fella out." Scratching the back of his head, Naruto looked to and from the mailman and his machines, before letting out a reluctant sigh. Taking a deep breath, he ignored the dark-haired man making a fist in the air, and unlocked the door. No funny business. Got it? Giving the man a stern look, he watched as the mailman threw his hands up in the air. Don't worry, I come in peace and all that good stuff. Cross my heart. He made a little motion with his hands over his chest. I'll be gone before you know it. Right. Rubbing his eyes and looking at the man suspiciously, Naruto gave a short nod and led Hermes to the counter. His gut was telling him this guy was trouble. Something about the guy screamed prankster. He would know, being one himself. Handing Hermes a menu, the blonde leaned against the counter as he unwrapped his paper cups from their box and picked one out for use. Take a look, and tell me what takes your fancy. I'll let you know if it's currently available or not. You got it. Naruto made a motion, and poked his head through the door leading to the kitchen, giving his clones a subtle sign not to come out. He didn't need a mailman catching his clones at work, nor did he want to explain why there were dozens of himself. Nice place you have here. Thanks, the blonde replied. How long have you been open? Not long, the blonde admitted, about 2 months. I opened up before the Christmas period started. Kept me busy and gave this place the boost it needed, but it got crazy busy and hectic some days. I sometimes wondered if I made a mistake. Hermes nodded. I bet. Christmas is always the worst when you're in our line of work. Delivering goods to the people of the world in whatever form that takes. Glancing across the menu, Hermes whistled, an appraising and dubious look on his face. Wow, Aphrodite wasn't kidding when she said this menu was varied. There's something of everything in here. The Olympian would admit he wasn't one to visit cafes often. They were more his sister's kind of thing or his aunt's. Like his brothers, he preferred bars or nightclubs since he picked up most of his hookup from them, though he enjoyed an occasional beer or two to go with the night. I need something to keep me awake for the rest of the day. Not knowing much apart from the standard caffeine-based beverages, Hermes eyed the drink in Naruto's hand. What do you have? Oh, this? Naruto took a small swig of his drink. It's a Spanish latte. Curiosity piquing, Hermes leaned on the tabletop. Is it any different from a regular latte? To answer his question, he received a waved hand in the middle of the air. It's more of an espresso-based drink with textured milk and condensed milk. It's sweeter than a latte, but not as much as a latte with flavored syrup. Though I don't use sugar in my drink, and instead, use honey. Hermes nodded his head and liked the sound of everything he just heard. I'll take one of those. He especially liked the espresso part. That would do the trick in keeping him awake. Sure, do you want food to take with you? Hermes scratched the back of his head, looking indecisive. If you can't decide, I've got some lemon squares left over from the day before. They won't be fresh, but they'll still taste good. I can have them bagged up for you. Free of charge since I made them the other day. The god's eyes lit up, and a bright expression washed over his face. That would be great. Thanks. No problem. Take a seat and I'll bring them over. Watching as the blonde owner turned around and prepared his drink, Hermes spun around and headed for the closest table. Maybe this place was alright after all, and everything Aphrodite was spouting on about wasn't just hot air. The mortal appeared decent enough. After all, who would give away lemon squares for free? No one he'd ever met, that's for sure. Not to mention, if he could win over his male-hating sister, then the guy must be doing something right. Though, watching as the mortal went to work, he understood why Aphrodite kept mentioning the handsome owner. If he'd won over the goddess of love, then Hermes could count down the days she inevitably invited him into her bed. Her two biggest weaknesses after all were chocolates and handsome mortals. This guy represented both, which meant he was as good as hers, and he didn't even know it. Though, it could be hard with Athena and Artemis around. Both seemed equally as interested in the mortal, though for different reasons. As far as Hermes was concerned, he was staying out of any trouble those three might create. He thought back to the love goddess, then again, she does like a challenge. He thought, leaning on the table and resting his head against his arms, I wonder if I should start a betting pool. 100 drachmas maybe? He would have to look into this some more when he wasn't feeling as tired. Sighing and rubbing his face as he waited for his order, Hermes shut his eyes and let his body relax. It was only for a minute. His schedule was getting busier by the minute, and spent all last night going from state to state. He earned this much. Granted, gods didn't need as much sleep as mortals did, and could theoretically remain awake for greater lengths of times. sometimes days and possibly even weeks depending on the god. However, he was reaching his limit. He just needed a moment to relax. After a few minutes passed, Naruto finished the drink, capping the top with a plastic lid and adding a paper sleeve to the takeaway cup. Alright, that's your drink. Give me a moment, and I'll bag up those lemon squares I promised. You alive back there? Z's. Stopping mid-step, Naruto glanced up from the drink, and his jaw dropped when he looked over at the table the mailman sat behind. You have to be kidding me. The Olympian had his face slumped against his arms, eyes covered by his forearm and mouth hanging wide open, causing loud snores and gargles to come out. A foot twitched against the leg of the chair, and his nose wrinkled. The blonde couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was this guy serious? He wasn't running a bed and breakfast. Marching over, Naruto initially gave Hermes a subtle shake to jolt him into consciousness. He whispered for him to wake up, but Hermes merely turned his head. When that failed, he shook him harder, adding some extra force into the shakes. When that also failed, he started throttling the guy, shaking him like a rag doll. Wake up, damn it. Despite Naruto practically throwing the guy around back and forth in his seat, the guy wouldn't wake up as he slumped back down on the table. The guy must have been the heaviest sleeper he'd ever seen. How heavy of a sleeper is he? This is ridiculous. He contemplated driving his fist into the back of his skull, reminiscent of Sakura waking him up during their Team 7 days. Though, he decided against it. It's not like this guy can't take the hit, he thought, standing back up and narrowing his eyes at the sleeping Olympian. I wasn't sure at first, but his energy matches those three women. He hides it well, and you'd think he was just an ordinary mailman, but he isn't. He acted normally around those women for the simple reason that they gave him no reason to be on guard with them. The blonde shinobi didn't say anything, staring at Hermes as the man's face twitched in his sleep. A smirk grew on his face and started cracking his neck and knuckles. If the guy wanted to fall asleep and leave himself open in such a manner, then that was his business. He was the one who knocked on his door before he was open. He'd been lenient and let the guy in, but now the mailman had the guts to fall asleep as he was about to send him off with free lemon squares? This guy didn't know he was in the presence of Konoha's prankster Kane. Deep down in his heart, Naruto was still a prankster and always would be. Seeing a prime opportunity in front of him, he couldn't resist. It got him thinking, when was the last time he pulled a prank on someone? Surely it wasn't as long as he was picturing. Over a decade maybe? Either way, he needed to shake the rust from his mind. He wasn't sure how long he had, but he wasn't going to let this chance slip his grasp. Buddy, you don't understand what kind of a mistake you've made. 20 minutes later, Naruto stifled a laugh as he looked at his handiwork. With more time, he could have created something more elaborate, but sadly he had to make use of his more childish side. Gods, he felt like a teenager from the modern world, laughing at something so mundane and perfectly natural. Teenagers found the silliest of things funny these days, but once again, humor was one of the many things that changed over the years. It was all jokes and penis references these days. Oh well, at least, this will teach him. Creating one more clone, he watched as the clone moved behind the sleeping god, crouched down and extended his index and middle finger until they were inches away from Hermes's derriere. A subtle nod from the original made the clone whisper, lightning release, two-finger jolt. The result was instant. 1 second, Hermes was peacefully sleeping away with his head in his arms, and the next, he was 5 feet in the air, his eyes wide as his hands fell to his bottom as a sharp pain radiated from his left cheek. The clone quickly disappeared as Hermes landed on his feet. Hey, you're awake, Hermes heard, turning around and facing the counter, where the original Naruto was waiting with a drink in one hand and a paper bag in the other. You were really out of it. I tried to wake you, but you're one of the heaviest sleepers I've ever seen. I wondered if you died for a moment. Wah, I fell asleep? The god rubbed his eyes, blinking the sleep out of them. When his eyes landed on the clock behind the counter, he went as pale as a ghost. Wait a minute. How long have I been asleep? About 20 minutes, maybe 25. Oh, no, no, no. Hermes ran a hand through his hair while the other grabbed his phone out of his pocket. He scrolled through his delivery list and felt his earlier stress return with a vengeance. There were half a dozen more orders, and they were all over the world. This was going to take him all morning and into the afternoon. I'm so screwed. As he headed for the door in a half jog, a cough caught his attention. Naruto stood looking at him with a knowing look, shaking the paper cup and bag at him. "Aren't you forgetting something?" "Oh, right." Running back and taking his order, Hermes placed some mortal money on the table for the drink before bolting and throwing the door open. "Thanks again." As sudden as he appeared, the god of messengers disappeared. As soon as the door shut behind him, the blonde ninja's calm facade broke and started to chuckle to himself. "I wonder how long it will take for him to notice," he thought. On his own once more, he clapped his hands together. "All right. Let's get this place ready. Olympus. Okay, something funny is going on here," Hermes thought as he walked the cobbled streets of Mount Olympus. Frowning, he watched as another pair of nymphs often found grazing around the foothills of Olympus sauntered off, erupting into a fit of giggles and hushed tones when they saw him. One by one, as the incidents grew, his paranoia started doing the same. Everyone he came across resulted in the same issue arising. It had been like that all day, and Hermes was beginning to think he was amiss on some kind joke floating around his immortal family. Every delivery stop since this morning, no matter who it was, would either start with them laughing at him or forcing themselves to look away as he handed them their delivery. Even George and Martha, whenever he was inside his chariot truck, would look away from him. He could have sworn he heard them laughing underneath their hisses. Truth be told, he cared little about his companions after his Spanish latte. He could still taste the delicious remnants of his drink on his lips. The Olympian almost crashed his chariot truck when he brought it up to his mouth for the first. Not to mention, the lemon squares were heavenly that his eyes nearly rolled into the back of his head. Oh, he understood the appeal after his cup was empty and his bag of lemon squares became substantially lighter. It was damn good. No, it was better than good. It was amazing. It was no wonder his sisters and the love goddess were taken with the little cafe the way they were. He would be going back in the future, and this time at a reasonable time. It could be a good place to pick up beautiful women too. Desiring nothing more than the rest he'd deservedly earned, he headed in the direction of his temple, located on the eastern side of Olympus. As he closed in on his home, Hermes spied a cloaked figure coming from the opposite direction. His smile grew, as the scent of toasted marshmallows and wood smoke danced around his nose and grew stronger the closer the figure got. There was only one person on Olympus who carried that delicious scent. Aunt Hestia. Hestia, the eldest of the gods and the firstborn child of Kronos and Rhea, was every bit as beautiful as her two younger sisters, carrying the sweet demeanor that earned her the love and respect from every resident on Olympus. Truthfully, she was desired by many on Olympus, and history had shown the suitors that offered themselves to her beauty. However, all were turned away, as Hestia remained true to her vow. Woe to any man who dared force themselves upon the goddess of the hearth, and would find themselves sent into the eternal darkness within Tartarus. "Hello, her." Her voice broke halfway through his name, her eyes marginally widening. "Oh dear." "Huh? Hermes, dear." His aunt's face softened, though a hint of annoyance laced her voice. "Have you been spending time with Ares again? Or did you run into Enyo?" He shook his head. "Not recently. I just got home from deliveries." He hadn't seen Ares all week. The god of war had disappeared off into the mortal world with Aphrodite again, likely on one of their so-called getaways, and the pair likely wouldn't be back for another week or so. Enyo, on the other hand, hadn't been seen in years. His wayward older sister didn't visit much, primarily due to the estrangement between her and her parents. "I see." Hermes watched as a mirror was conjured in his aunt's hand. "Have you looked in the mirror recently?" Shaking his head, his aunt held the mirror up to his face, and Hermes couldn't stop his jaw from dropping. "What the hell?" A shocked gasp erupted from his body and caught himself leaning closer to the mirror, his hand reaching up and touching his forehead. "Aunt Hestia." "Yes, Hermes? Why is there a penis drawn on my face?" His aunt's smile never faltered. "I don't know, Hermes. I was hoping you would fill me in. I'm equally as confused as you are." Hermes got a sense his good-natured aunt was trying her best not to laugh at his current predicament. The way the edges of her mouth twitched and the way her idle hand tugged at the hems of her sleeves were a telltale sign. It wasn't hard for the Olympian to determine who defaced his face. There was only one moment in the day where he could say he was unaware of his surroundings. How had he not noticed? It was over 12 hours later. He'd been walking around with a penis drawn on his face the whole day. It was no wonder people couldn't keep a straight face when they saw him. Even Hestia looked ready to bust a gut in hysterics. That asshole barista did this to me. The image of Naruto appeared in his mind, and Hermes couldn't stop his eyes from blazing with godly energy. No wonder he seemed in such a good mood when he woke up. His aunt's eyebrows raised. Barista? He threw his hands in the air, the one Aphrodite keeps talking about. He stomped away, snapping his fingers and making the ink-drawn penis disappear from his forehead. If he thinks he got one over on me, then he's got another thing coming. Doesn't he know who I am? Rubbing his hands like a Disney villain, a devious glint appeared in his eyes. Oh. The payback that's coming his way will be legendary. I practically invented mischief and pranks. The smile never faltered from Hestia. I'm sure, dear. Though I'm sure he meant no harm, so please go easy on the mortal. Nothing life-threatening, please, she asked, with an edge of authority laced in her words. Granted, the mortal had been rather ballsy to do such a thing to her immortal nephew, but he didn't deserve to die over it. Thankfully, Hermes was one of the more laid-back gods on Olympus. If such a thing happened to Ares or gods forbid Zeus, then she doubted the mortal would last another second. He'd be reduced to ash before he could blink. I won't do anything rash, Aunt Hestia. I'm just going to one-up him. That's all. I'm not that petty. Thank you, Hermes. Watching him walk away, Hestia spied the clothes on his back, before letting out a giggle as she covered her mouth. It appeared the face sketch had not been the only gift Hermes received. On the back of Hermes' mailman uniform, the barista also added some extra patchwork to his mailman uniform. In this case, in bright orange letters, the words, "Juicy," in all capitals, were sewn across his back, with an arrow pointing down to Hugh Nephew's posterior. I wonder how long it will be before he notices. Hestia muttered to herself, watching her nephew march away before continuing down the path, the odd giggle escaping her lips throughout the rest of her day. Okay, I've got 3 coffees for the 3 of you, Naruto spoke cheerfully, lowering his tray close to the table as he placed the 3 cups of steaming coffee next to his waiting customers. I'm sorry for the wait. It's been a little hectic in here this past hour. That's okay. We don't mind, the woman in the middle said, her dark brown eyes flickering between Naruto and the 2 other women on either side of her. It smells heavenly, doesn't it, girls? Absolutely. It was worth the wait. His smile widened a fraction, and bowed his head to them. You're very kind. If he had to guess, the 3 young women sat around the table appeared to be sisters, possessing long dark hair and elfin-like features that only served to enhance their appearance. They attracted some attention from the other patrons, though they didn't appear to notice. Though the winter was reaching its end and its chill lingered in the air, all 3 were wearing dress tops that left their arms bare. Each was comprised of different shades of white, making Naruto shiver looking at them. He guessed some people didn't get affected by the cold as others did. He wished he was that lucky. Moments before the 3 women came inside, the current of the wind strengthened for the briefest of moments. It was enough for the regular citizens of New York not to make heads or tails of it, but it was enough for him to take notice. Years of training on Mount Myoboku had sharpened his senses to an extreme level, to the point where he could sense nature chakra and related energy sources without the need to activate Sage Mode. The women, while nowhere near the level of particular individuals that visited the fox's den, he could sense were still stronger than the average human by a sizable amount. Not to mention when they walked into view of the store, he could have sworn their hair and the hems of their dress tops were dancing in the air. Like the others, he saw no reason to keep them away. As long as they didn't start any funny business, then they were welcome any time. Now, I've got 2 slices of the Russian honey biscuit cake. He lowered the plates down, and felt a bubble of excitement as the 2 women on the left and right made dreamy expressions as they gazed at their orders. Their forks found their way into their hands like magic, and were eagerly digging in before he could lower the 3rd plate onto the table, and 1 sticky toffee pudding. A similar look arose of the middle woman and saw her mouth silent words to herself. If you need anything else, you know where to find me. We certainly will, she muttered, slipping a piece into her mouth and letting out a sigh of pleasure. The 2 next to her erupted into a fit of giggles, with the blonde leaving them to enjoy their orders. Truth be told, as he wandered back to the counter, he'd noticed more and more similar individuals and groups like the 3 women appearing as of late. It had been happening over the last couple of weeks, during sporadic times in the day. He'd felt something off about them all as soon as they appeared close to the den, though he sensed differences with the energy and life force that coursed through their veins. Some were like the women currently in a daze with their cake orders, where the natural energy within them felt air-based. Others that came felt more connected to the earth, more traditional energy, much like when he manipulated senjutsu. In the back of his mind, the energy reminded him of the Zetsu clones created from the first Hokage's cells, though with none of the malevolent intent or evil nature. All he felt was positivity radiating from them, and all had a tinge of green to their skin that only he noticed. Though, not that he let on. Then there was the small group a few days ago with energy that radiated like the sea, with a distinct smell of the ocean and the beaches lingering on their person. More often than not, they were all beautiful, all possessing the elfin appearances he became accustomed to when greeting and serving them. 90% of the time, they were women, though occasionally, a male or two appeared through his doors. It started with an individual or a pair visiting each day, but soon the fox's den was becoming a hotspot for the elfin beauties. Each day, more and more seemed to be appearing. If he was honest, Naruto never imagined the fox's den would become a hotspot for nymphs of all things. It took him a couple of visits to realize what they were. If he had to put money on it, then the three women sat around the table currently must have been air nymphs, if what he felt was any indication. The number of encounters he'd had with nymphs weren't many and were sporadic over the years. Thinking back on it, the last time he saw a nymph was over 300 years ago, somewhere in Europe. Germany if he remembered right, or possibly France. With a moment of peace and everyone inside happy with their orders, the blonde grabbed a spare tray and started moving around the tables, collecting up the finished plates and cups. Thanks to the first 3 months being a success, Naruto chose to make a few changes in the kitchen, namely to make the working hours for his clones a little easier. His clones had been a godsend, and if not for them, his menu for the den would have been a fraction of what he offered, especially when it came to the cakes and desserts. So, he installed a commercial dishwasher and glass washer, instead of cleaning them all by hand by the sinks. So far, it had made a world of difference. It was always funny to see how the smallest of things could make all the difference in the workplace. He was halfway around the room making his rounds, his tray stacked high with plates and cups when he found himself freezing in place. His eyes flickered up to the entrance of the den, hovering over the door. Slowly, he journeyed back to the front after dropping the tray off in the kitchen, handing it off to a clone who looked at him with a serious expression. Every clone behind him had stopped, each wearing a similar look on their faces. They felt it too. It was another energy signature. However, this one was vastly different from the nymphs that occupied his tables. He didn't sense any attachment to the air, or the earth, or the sea. It was darker in nature and made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. In short, the energy felt like death. Looking across the room, the trio of nymphs had sensed the oncoming power as well, if the way their bodies stiffened. Their eyes were wide as dinner plates, expressions stuck in a mask of fear and terror. No one else in the room appeared to be affected, though he had no time to determine how or why when the bell over the doorway jingled, a waft of cold air entering the room as a body walked inside. The person in question was male, standing around the same height as himself with skin the color of teakwood. His eyes were a haunting shade of gold, like the honey he offered to his customers with their tea and coffee. Long black hair flowed past his shoulders, like a curtain of shadows that covered part of his regal and king-like face. He was dressed immaculately, wearing a suit that made the Hollywood stars from the TV look inadequate in comparison. Across the room, as he made his way towards the counter, some of his female customers took notice. If the blushes appearing on their faces were any indication, they found the man very attractive. When he got to the counter, Naruto noticed the man looking around the room, not giving anything away with his expressionless face. The man made him feel a little on edge, though outwardly he didn't show it. Anyone that gave off a sense of death needed to be closely watched, especially around so many civilians who were none the wiser. He looked at the three nymphs out of the corner of his eye, though noticed the man briefly look their way as well. All three visibly gulped, and to Naruto's surprise, gave the man a short curtsy, despite being sat down. Just who is this guy? He thought, before putting on a smile. Welcome to the Fox's Den, Naruto welcomed, ending the silence and catching the man's attention. As he did with every customer, he took out a menu and offered it to the finely dressed man. However, unlike everyone else that walked through his doors, the man didn't take the menu. Instead, he stared at Naruto, then looked in the glass cabinet where many of the den's cakes were presented to the public, and then back at the blonde. "Are you the owner of this establishment?" His voice was rich and velvety. It was so smooth the blonde could picture the voice belonging in a blues club, making the women swoon and sway with his velvety tunes. "I am. Is there something I can help you with?" The man nodded, lacing his fingers together and placing them on top of the counter. "You can. My name is Mr. Black. I'm here representing a client, if you will, who wishes to privately book your establishment out for an afternoon." Naruto's eyebrows raised in surprise. This was a first. Really? Truthfully, he hadn't looked into the idea of customers privately renting the space out for an afternoon or an evening. "Really?" The man nodded, his face remaining impassive as honey gold met blue. "My client has caught wind of your establishment and heard the glowing reviews from members of her family that have already visited. Her interest has piqued because of it, and she wishes to visit you to see if the word of mouth is true." The blonde nodded, though he adopted a confused look. "Well, that's great and all, but why does she need to rent out the entire place? Can't she visit during my regular days? The list when we're open is displayed on the window on the right as you enter." "Unfortunately not, due to certain time constraints." The man known as Mr. Black answered back immediately as if expecting the question. "My client is a busy woman, who has important duties and responsibilities that she must see to, around these months in particular." The man shifted his stance, reaching into his pocket and pulled a check. "Her current place of work can be rather time-consuming." Rubbing the back of his head, Naruto guessed he could understand the reasoning, though renting it out for one person seemed a bit much. Who was this person anyway? Some kind of CEO of some big-time corporation? Or maybe some visiting princess or queen? He was sure he didn't have any royalty visit his little cafe yet. At least, none that he knew of anyway. Not to mention, if this guy who sensed like death was working for someone, did that mean the woman he was referring to also carried around the same kind of feeling? Humming to himself, and tapping his fingers against the counter, Mr. Black patiently waited for Naruto to speak. "So, it's one person renting the place out? Am I getting that right? I'll be catering to one person if I accept? Two? Her husband will be coming with her." The blonde sighed as the picture forming in his mind became clearer. "Okay, I guess that makes sense. They want a private space to enjoy their meal? That's correct." Motioning for his visitor to wait one moment, the blonde disappeared into the back room. Before long, he returned, this time with a red book in his hands, revealed to be a business diary. "It shouldn't be too much of an issue, so long as they give me some time to warn my other customers. This is the first time I've done something like this since I opened." Taking out a pen from beneath the counter, he held it ready in his hand. "Did your client have a date in mind?" "She did. She would like the 14th of February. "The 14th though," Naruto started, beginning to flick through the pages before stopping a moment later. He gave the man a deadpan stare. "The 14th of February? That's right. So, Valentine's Day. Once again, that is correct." Putting down his pen, Naruto gave the so-called Mr. Black a skeptical look. This guy couldn't be serious, could he? "Let me get this straight. Your client wants to privately book out my cafe for an afternoon on Valentine's Day of all days? One of the potentially busiest days of the year for someone like me? Which also happens to be tomorrow." The blonde shinobi felt like wringing the guy's neck when he nodded. "That's right. Hence, why I was given this." He held up the hand with the check still resting in his grasp and placed it down on the counter. "My client is the understanding kind, and to compensate you for your time and willingness to accept under short notice, I was permitted to offer you a blank check." Naruto blinked in surprise and tilted his head when he stared down at the check. True to Mr. Black's words, the part of the check that displayed the amount of money was blank of any writing, while a very neatly written signature was present in the bottom corner. "Your client is serious about this, huh?" She is. She is a lady of taste and is not the type who visits the average establishment. For her to come to your business and bring her husband with her is a great honor." The blonde noticed the way the smartly dressed man enforced the last part of his sentence. "So, I can write any amount on here?" The man nodded, so he further asked, "I could write down something like $1 million and that wouldn't be an issue?" Watching Mr. Black closely, the man pushed a lock of stray hair out of his face, his gold eyes boring into his own with something akin to amusement. "Mr. Uzumaki?" Naruto nodded, and let the man continue. All I will say is that money is of no issue to my clients. Name your price, and I shall inform my client you will be expecting them tomorrow without delay." The blonde shinobi couldn't help but whistle, both in amazement and amusement. Whoever they were, they must have pockets that ran deep into the earth if they could throw around words like that. Rubbing his chin as he let the information sink in, he ignored Mr. Black's expressionless stare as the man waited for a response. The blonde shinobi of old wasn't worried when it came to money. Not in the slightest. Over the years of his existence, Naruto had done the smart thing and kept a little nest egg to the side that over time began to grow and grow. It was the side effects of becoming a responsible adult. When his decision to come to New York and set up shop was decided, he dipped into that nest egg and got everything he would need with it. His home, the fox's den, all the appliances and furniture. Not to mention all his ingredients. If he was honest, when everything was added up, it hadn't broken the tip of the iceberg of the fortune he was sitting on. He rarely touched it and had it all hidden away in a location only he was aware of. Everything he made from the fox's den went into a bank account he set up before arriving. He couldn't look too suspicious. Then again, I am running a business and that's a whole afternoon of revenue not coming my way. $1 million is too much, even if their pockets are too deep to make sense of. He didn't want to appear too greedy, but if they were offering a chance to fill his wallet, then why not? He wouldn't go too overboard. $10,000 and you have yourself a deal. Seemed like a fair ask. Hiding his surprise, he watched as Mr. Black didn't bat an eyelash and pulled out a fancy-looking Mont Blanc fountain pen from his inside pocket. Is that made of real gold? How fancy are these people? Scribbling the amount on the check, Mr. Black looked him dead in the eye, the check being offered to the blonde barista. Taking it and giving it a once-over, Naruto smirked at Mr. Black. "I hope this doesn't bounce." That would be embarrassing after everything the man just told him. Mr. Black didn't react, he remained completely stone-faced as he replied, "Trust me, Mr. Uzumaki, it won't." "If you say so." Glancing at the name written on the check, he rose an eyebrow. "Mrs. P. Underhill? Might I inquire what her first name is? I like to know the names of the people whose money I'm taking." Rolling his neck, a distinct pop made the mysterious Mr. Black sigh in comfort before answering, "You'll get your answers tomorrow. Until then, all you need to know is that my clients will arrive tomorrow at 4 p.m. How long they will stay for, I don't know. However, I recommend that you prepare thoroughly. Mrs. Underhill is known to be demanding if the gossip she's heard about your food is anything to go by." He leaned in, with Naruto reacting by doing the same. "She has a sweet tooth that puts many to shame, though can be picky. She has high expectations. Is that right?" Naruto rubbed his chin, a thoughtful expression sweeping over him. If she had high expectations, then he would need to pull a few rabbits out of his hat. As confident as he was that his menu would knock their socks off, he could prepare some specials dishes for his guests. If they were willing to part with $10,000, then he was going to give them their money's worth. A couple of ideas were floating around. He could have a lot of fun with this. He had a few dishes in the pipeline he could test out tomorrow. "Are there any dietary restrictions I should know about?" "None. Any preferences I should know about?" Again, Mr. Black shook his head. "Well, that made things easy. All right then. In that case, you have yourself a deal." The blonde extended his hand to the man. "Tell Mr. and Mrs. Underhill I'll have some specials whipped up just for them. I'll make sure they get their money's worth." It took a few moments of silence before Mr. Black reciprocated. The man had a firm handshake, and Naruto couldn't help noticing how cold the man's hands were. They felt like ice cubes. "I'll pass on the message." Nodding, the blonde pocketed the check. Before the man left, he spoke up again. "Can I get you anything before you go?" Mr. Black was prepared to turn around and leave at a moment's notice, but he couldn't deny the smell radiating from the fox's den was heavenly. He looked across the room, ignoring the shivering forms of the nymphs, and looks at what some of the mortals were eating and drinking. He hadn't visited a cafe in the mortal world in decades. His eyes flickered to the cabinet with the cakes, zeroing in on the chocolate cake to the far left. His tongue licked the edge of his mouth. "That looks good." Straightening his tie, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I'll take a slice of the chocolate cake to go, and a regular coffee with no sugar." "Coming right up. Valentine's Day." "My dear, you can't be serious," Hades muttered, his voice low as his dark eyes took in the orange frame that wrapped around the front of the building. He'd never seen something so hideous and deliberate in centuries. It was like a monstrous beacon of color, and far too bright for his rich taste. Being in an environment where the brightest colors were the glowing crimsons and dark yellows that emanated from the rivers of lava that ran through the underworld, he could say that if he ever found something that sickly shade of orange anywhere near his home, he would send it deep into Tartarus. It would never see the light of day again if he had his way. Who in their right mind would paint the front of their business orange? Standing on his left, his wife of nearly 5,000 years stood in all her outstanding beauty and glory, an array of shopping bags of all shapes and sizes in her grasp. Persephone was as beautiful as the day he first laid eyes on her, more so than that pesky love goddess in his opinion. The shining flower of the underworld, her very presence brought out a side of the eldest son of Kronos that few would get to see. When it was time to separate and her time came to return to Olympus, it was like the joy and happiness she brought with her would evaporate, leaving nothing but his dark thoughts and the ever-present wails of those within the fields of punishment. He felt his wife lean into him, the top of her head barely coming up to his shoulder. Even wearing those ludicrous heeled boots she chose to wear on their outings into the mortal world, he towered over her as he did with most people. He didn't show it, but he was disappointed she wasn't wearing the black dress she frequently wore whilst in the underworld. The one that billowed around her body like smoke, and gave off an aura of mystery. Millennia on from the day they married and his wife was still capable of making his godly ichor boil with desire. Don't be a bore, Hades. There's nothing wrong with adding a splash of color to an otherwise dull palette. A snort came out of Hades. Persephone, a splash of color is painting a window frame red, or a letterbox a shade of blue. A splash of color is not painting the outside of the building the most hideous shade of orange imaginable. Be that as it may, I like it. You would like it. Are you doubting my tastes? Never, my dear. I'm merely showing how different our color preferences are. Dressed in one of his finest suits for their day in the mortal world, the god of the underworld hadn't been able to hide his skepticism when his wife informed him of their plans for Valentine's Day. If the elder god was honest, he didn't see the point in Valentine's Day. It was a silly little mortal holiday that used that dreadful son of Aphrodite and Ares as the mascot. The love goddess was bad enough on the rare occasion that he came into contact with her, but her son was equally as bad. The only difference between them was Aphrodite knew where the line was when it came to her Olympian family. Eros, on the other hand, had a habit of forgetting the line existed. Being one of the few gods who could strike genuine fear into the hearts of an Olympian like Zeus, Demeter and Hera thanks to the powers endowed to him by Aphrodite, Hades always kept one eye open should he discover Eros was nearby and in the neighborhood. Those love-enforced arrows of his could do more harm than good. By some divine miracle, the son of Aphrodite knew better than to pick a fight with him, though he couldn't deny a piece of him wished the little pigeon-winged cherub would give it a try. Oh, the satisfaction he would get from beating that little annoyance into Tartarus would be legendary. Back to the point of Valentine's Day, Hades didn't understand why he needed to show his wife how much he loved her on this one particular day. During the 6 months of the year that Persephone was in his embrace, he tried to show her every day how much he loved her. Granted, there were missteps along the way and their time together had been a learning experience for both of them. His undeserving black heart did love his queen and wife to Tartarus and back. He didn't need a silly holiday to show it in excess. Well, shall we go in? Persephone asked, her watery gold eyes silently motioning to the front door and unaware of his thoughts. Sighing, the god of the underworld knew there was no getting around it. Very well. Persephone puffed out her cheeks in annoyance. You could try and sound enthusiastic. That was me being enthusiastic. His response only served to get a groan out of his wife. Crossing his arms over his chest, his dark pupils flickered to the corner of his eyes, looking in the direction of the Empire State Building. A heavy scowl marred his face, and one of his hands tightened into a fist. Although the mist shrouded Olympus from the sight of the mortals, Hades could feel its presence lingering over the famous skyscraper. The home of the Greek pantheon has never been a home to him, nor did it welcome him like it did the rest of his family. Being near its doorstep, it never failed to stir up old and bitter feelings. His so-called family were the ones who made him into the person he was, keeping him at a distance at all times and never trusting him the same way after the Titanomachy. His temple should have been on Olympus, just as his brothers and sisters were built on its surface. Hell, Poseidon had one on Olympus and within Atlantis. There was no telling how many that dunderhead, Zeus, had. The point was, he helped build Olympus into what it was, and should have been recognized for that like the rest of them. Why couldn't they have gone to another city? Before Hades could let his thoughts begin running away, the petite and smooth hand of his wife laced through his fingers. The contact was enough to halt those thoughts. Stop thinking about them. I wasn't. He didn't fight her grip as she pried his hand away from his crossed arms. Yes, you were. A pang of sympathy ran through Persephone's chest. The goddess of spring had learned the telltale signs of her husband over the millennia. She knew something was bothering him like a pit in her stomach. I know you don't like being so close to Olympus and it stirs up old feelings and grudges, but we've had a nice day out so far, haven't we? It took a moment, but Hades gave a short nod. Good, I'm glad. Let's not spoil it with ill feelings. His expression softened. It's not that I haven't enjoyed our time today. I have enjoyed it, I promise. He gave her hand a light squeeze, and felt the corners of his mouth twitch up when she smiled at the gesture. I don't see why we couldn't have gone somewhere else. California? Boston? Even Miami would have been a welcome change. The essence of my siblings and Zeus's ilk can be sensed all across New York. I'm surprised we haven't run into one of them yet. A sigh escaping her lips, Persephone dropped her bags and laced her arms around her husband's neck. The gesture was enough to feel Hades lean his body into her, embracing in the warmth she provided. Despite the size difference in their appearance, the queen of the underworld proved she was stronger than she looked. Today is all about us. Don't make it about them. Hades stayed silent for a couple of moments, letting her words sink in. I know, and I'll try. That's all I ask. Standing on her tiptoes, Persephone laid a gentle kiss on her husband's pale cheek. Put them out of your mind and enjoy this place with me. I've heard great things about it. Even Thanatos told me how much he enjoyed the food here. The crumbs from his chocolate cake were still on the corner of his lips when he came to confirm the reservation. I guess if Thanatos enjoyed it, then it's worth a try, Hades admitted. Like most of the gods and goddess of his ever-expanding godly family, his lieutenant was a picky eater, and like himself, had a rich taste when it came to mortal cuisine. If Thanatos enjoyed what he ate, then it couldn't have been awful. Though, he was still skeptical about the kind of man that painted part of a building orange. Lead the way, my love. Persephone beamed at Hades, the twitching of his lips strengthening until a small smile graced his often scowling face. Pushing the door open, the sound of the bell rang as they entered. Like their fellow immortals, a wave of warmth shrouded over them, and Hades watched as his wife visibly relaxed and together they took in the room. The rich smell of coffee laced the air, reminding him of the mornings his wife would wake him up with his favorite blend of coffee. The room was bigger than either of them expected, with tables and chairs pushed to each side, with one singular table with two chairs sat in the middle of the room. You must be the Underhills. Both sets of eyes gazed over to the counter, where the patiently waiting owner was stood. The Underhills? Hades thought, rolling his eyes at the surname Persephone had given them. His wife loved coming up with new aliases for them during matters like this. Walking out from behind the counter, Naruto extended his hand to Hades, a pleasant smile on his face as he greeted the pair of immortals. My name's Naruto Uzumaki, the owner of the Fox's Den. First things first, I would like to thank you for taking an interest in my humble establishment. When your representative came by yesterday, I hardly believed it. I thought he was joking at first, but I can see he was telling the truth. It's nice to meet you both. Shaking his hand, Hades noted the firm grip the blonde gave him and felt his wife step forward and offer her hand. Instead of shaking her hand though, Naruto gently took her hand into his own and placed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The act was enough for Persephone to widen her smile. She liked a mortal with manners. He's very easy on the eyes too, Persephone thought. A handsome face, and a very nice body if the way his clothes tighten on his body is any indication. She was no Aphrodite, but she could window shop from time to time. You're most welcome, and I'm happy you accepted my offer. I'm sorry for the short notice, but the news doesn't tend to travel to our neck of the woods until much later, though I've heard nothing but good things about this place. If he had told Thanatos no, then Persephone planned on having him wrapped up in the mist and make it happen either way. I'm Penelope Underhill, and this is my husband, Hank Underhill. Persephone promptly ignored the look her husband was giving her. Well, come over and take a seat. Reaching behind the counter, He pulled out 2 menus and offered them to the pair of gods. "Make yourself comfortable, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at the menu." He motioned to their table. "Also, just so you're aware, I've got some specials of the day prepared for you both. Think of it as my way of ensuring you get your money's worth today. I'll read them out when I take your orders." "Thank you, that sounds delightful," Persephone replied, the excitement brimming as she wondered what Naruto had prepared for them. Gently, she pulled her husband to their table, with the god of the underworld glancing at Naruto from the corner of his eyes. Making themselves comfortable and discarding her coat, Persephone eyed her husband. "So? What do you think so far?" The god of the underworld took notice of the excitement in his wife's voice. She looked at him expectantly, without trying anything on the menu. "I can't make any judgment yet." When his wife scowled at him, he internally sighed and made a change to his answer. "It appears adequate. The place has a nice atmosphere. The rich smell of coffee is pleasing, I'll admit." As suspected, her face made a 180. "I knew you'd like it." The goddess of spring sounded very pleased with herself. "There's so much to choose from in here. I'm not sure where to start." The beginning would suffice. A kick to his shin beneath the table forced him to grunt. "Don't be sarcastic, my love. It's unbecoming of you." Persephone remained focused on the menu, a content smile plastered on her face. Hades could see her eyes at work, taking in all her options. "I wonder what specials he made for us. It's all very intriguing. I find myself curious also," Hades replied. An annoyed expression wormed its way onto his face. "Was Hank the best you could think of? It's a nice name. It's a traditional name in the mortal world." The goddess glanced up. "Is there something wrong with my choice?" "Nothing, but I don't see why we can't use our real names." "Because no self-respecting mortal woman would name their child after the god of the underworld. Name one mortal carrying your name, and we can go home right now." When he didn't speak, Persephone's smile gained a satisfaction to it. "I rest my case. Now, less brooding and more choosing. Understood?" Remaining silent, Hades opened the menu up and let his dark eyes scan over the contents. He would let Persephone have her fun. His wife did appear excited during their shopping spree earlier in the afternoon. "There appears to be something for everything in here," he mumbled, his hand coming up to sweep his oily black hair back. He must go through ingredients like they're going out of fashion if he offers everything he says he does. He must be doing well to afford it. As the richest member of his Olympian family, call him curious if he wondered how a mortal could afford such a massive selection. Most places he was aware of didn't provide a third of what the blonde owner was offering to his clientele. Did he make everything that was listed on the menu? If not, then he must have dozens of suppliers in the pipeline. His cash flow must be a constant wave. He couldn't help with the way he thought. As the god of riches, it sparked his curiosity. "Focus, Hades. Pick something before your wife calls you out on it." While Hades was busy mulling over his thoughts, Persephone was busy biting the corners of her mouth. She couldn't decide what she wanted. Everything sounded so good. Where to start? If it wasn't for word getting to her by Hermes, who was delivering a package to Hecate in her residence within the underworld, then she wouldn't have heard a peep about the fox's den. News tended to reach the underworld slower than most, though when she asked why she hadn't heard about such a place existing sooner, she noticed Hermes begin to shuffle around uncomfortably. Surely, any place that attracted the attention of multiple Olympians was worth hearing about. Despite not being an Olympian, being one of the eldest children of Zeus, as well as the queen of the underworld had its perks. Suffice to say, it took 5 minutes before she had Hermes spilling out all the gossip on Olympus. Her time in the underworld had provided her with many a means to get the information out of her unwilling hostage. By the time she let her little brother free, Persephone was internally seething. Cracks formed on the marble floor of her husband's palace as she marched back to her chambers. That damn Aphrodite. Oh, she knew the love goddess could be petty, but she was asking for it now. Aphrodite had done everything in her power to keep the information from getting to the queen of the underworld, and Persephone knew why. Their little rivalry that started with Adonis all those years ago continued to plague them to this day and only worsened as time went on. The two goddesses used to be good friends, but these days after the Adonis incident, their relationship never recovered. The two were always trying to one-up each other in a variety of ways, to the point that the other gods would simply bypass them. The stunts they pulled on each other were legendary. However, when one of her mother's servants informed her by iris message that the love goddess planned to visit and spend the evening at the fox's den with the owner's scrumptious treats, the goddess of spring couldn't help but throw a wrench in her plans. Valentine's Day was a big day for Aphrodite, and Persephone couldn't help but grin at the satisfaction of denying the love goddess of what she desired. Even if it was for only one day. She couldn't sense the love goddess's essence anywhere near the fox's den, which meant she hadn't stopped by yet. The look on her face would be priceless. When 5 minutes passed, the two gods felt their host appear next to them, his notebook and pen in hand as he gave them a polite smile. "So, before I take your orders, would you like me to read out the specials for you?" The blonde looked pleased with himself. "Yes, please," Persephone replied, followed by a nod from Hades. She couldn't wait. "Well," Naruto started, "for this special day, I have arranged 3 different dishes for you, all of which were freshly baked earlier today. The first of which is a grapefruit curd tart with chamomile whipped cream." Persephone's eyes lit up, followed by an audible intake of air. The second is a fig almond tea cake with a coconut honey glaze. Finally, since it's Valentine's Day, I thought the third option should be something related to the subject of love, so I prepared a chocolate-dipped strawberry Neapolitan cake. Hades hummed as he leaned back in his chair. The god of the underworld wouldn't admit it out loud, but the choices laid out to them sounded very appetizing. If the mortal prepared such dishes for them, and if he liked them, he would be willing to leave a generous tip for the man, despite the money already provided. Despite his reputation, Hades commended hard work and dedication. Looking at his wife, Persephone was practically bouncing in her chair, her eyes lit up like fireworks. If the dishes were half as good as the gossip suggested, then Persephone contemplated dragging the man to the underworld and having him set up shop just for her. She had a spot in mind next to her famous garden. That way, she and her husband could have their orders brought to them on the veranda overlooking the fields of asphodel. Her fellow goddesses might not be happy with the change in location, and it meant they would have to gain her husband's permission to enter his realm if they wanted to visit. Seeing his wife's excitement, he snapped his menu shut and looked his wife square in the eye. "In that case, we'll take all 3. My wife and I will share a plate of each of your specials between us." Naruto nodded and wrote it down on his notepad. His smile widened when he saw Persephone reach over the table and take her husband's free hand into her own. A tiny smile grew on the face of Hades and winked in his wife's direction. It was beautiful to see how in love the pair were with each other. He got the feeling the husband was the type who would go to the moon and back if it made his wife happy. "You guys are a sweet couple." "That's kind of you to say," Persephone replied, her thumb tracing against her husband's pale skin. "He can be as stubborn as a mule when he wants to be, and moodier than a bull seeing red, but deep down my hubby is a softie. Not enough people are lucky enough to see that side of him, but I do." She gave her husband a reassuring squeeze. "It hasn't been easy, but we've been married for a long time and overcome obstacles that would cause most to call it quits. I hope he knows how much I have come to love him." The god of the underworld's expression softened further. "He does. You're lucky to have each other," Naruto replied, his gaze turning and staring out the window at the people walking the pavement across the road. "Most people these days don't seem to understand how precious marriage is, especially when the right person comes along. It provides an opportunity to grow in selflessness as you serve your wife, or husband, and any children that come from the union. It's more than a physical union, it is also a spiritual and emotional union." Both immortals looked at him with mild surprise. They both looked into his blue eyes and noticed a sadness within them. "Any kids?" Both nodded. "A daughter," Hades quietly replied, still looking up at the blonde owner with an inquisitive stare. "That's nice. Are you married?" The question came from Persephone. Right before her eyes, she noticed a momentary shift happen with the blonde owner. Like a door had been cracked open, followed by a wave of sadness briefly resonating from his person, and his face gaining a faraway look as a sad smile took over. Persephone almost wished she hadn't asked. "Widowed." "Oh," her voice was quiet, "I'm sorry." She hadn't intended to stir up old feelings. To be so young and already a widow must have been difficult. He looked barely out of his 20s. It took a few silent moments before the blonde shook off the sadness, his smile returning to normal and waving a hand in the air. "Don't be. It was a long time ago. Seeing you both together reminds me of my time with my wife, and how I wish we had longer together. I miss her, dearly." He brought his notepad and pen back up. Now, let's keep going with your orders, shall we? What would you both like to drink? Oh, that's right. They still had their drinks to order. Releasing her husband's hands, Persephone had a skim through the menu one last time before she confidently knew what she wanted. I would love one of your coconut and vanilla cappuccinos, please. It sounds delicious. Nodding his head, Naruto turned to Hades. Could you serve anything a little stronger? Hades asked. The hot drinks offered on the menu sounded good, but the elder god had a desire for something with an extra something in them. Stronger? In what way? Say with a little extra kick? Hades put some emphasis on the last part and Persephone watched as an understanding occurred between the two men. Tapping his chin with his pen, Naruto made a humming sound. I get you. Normally, I wouldn't serve any alcohol in my drinks, which is why I haven't put any on the menu. Although, I could make an exception given the private setting. Did you have something in mind? Perhaps an Irish coffee? Would that be out of the question? A half grin stretched onto Naruto's face. I think you might be in luck. Naruto gave an appraising look. I like your style, Hank Underhill. Hades nodded in the blonde's direction, saying nothing about the alias. It will take a bit longer to prepare, so I hope you don't mind the wait. That's fine. The rulers of the underworld watched the blonde disappear and get their orders ready, leaving the pair to rejoin their hands across the table. He seems nice. He's all right, Hades replied, for a mortal anyway. Persephone leaned her free elbow on the table and placed her head in her palm. We should bring Melinoe with us next time. That girl doesn't leave the underworld enough. Although, she rubbed tiny circles in the back of her husband's hand, it might have to wait until the fall. I'll be returning to Olympus in a few weeks. Maybe we can plan an outing for the three of us when I return in the fall? A grunt came out of Hades' mouth. He wasn't against the idea. He just didn't like hearing his wife speak about their upcoming separation for 6 months. Don't be like that. It will give us something to look forward to when I return in the autumn season. I'd like it better if you stayed with me all year round. Hades spat bitterly. If it wasn't for that overbearing idiot I'm forced to call my sister throwing a tantrum, then you would be with me always. To this day, after millennia had passed, the relationship with Demeter only worsened over time. The goddess of the harvest and the seasons couldn't accept that Persephone could love someone like him. If Demeter had her way, which at one point she did, then she would lock her daughter away in a secret location only known to her, and barred anyone else from their family from ever seeing her. Demeter took the term mother knows best to an extreme level, and he knew how frustrated Persephone could get with the woman who tried to control every aspect of her life. You're doing it again, my love. A knowing look crossed over her face before the goddess stood up from her seat. Never breaking the hold on her husband's hand, Persephone guided her chair around the table and sat next to him. You can't help yourself with forcing negative feelings to filter into your mind, can you? What am I going to do with you? You could stay with me, and tell Demeter to fuck off back to the nearest wheat field. He replied, though regretted it when Persephone picked up a spoon and bobbed him on the forehead with it. Ow, you might not like her, but she is still my mother, no matter how overbearing she can be. It comes from a place of love. Leaning back in her chair, she crossed one leg over the other. If you're a good husband for the rest of today, and you don't allow any more negative thoughts to filter their way in, I might consider treating you later. Treating me? Reaching next to the table, Persephone pulled up one of her many shopping bags and gave it a shake in the air. While you were busy ogling one of the store's clerk's chest, she gave him a brief look, making Hades have the decency to gulp. He thought he'd been more discreet. I went and got a little something from the lingerie department. I thought I could wear it tonight. The lingerie department? Humming in confirmation, a coy smirk wove its way onto her face. Would you like me to wear them for you tonight? It comes with this little piece that leaves little to the imagination. Hands still together, Persephone could almost feel her husband's godly ichor begin to heat up at the thought. Would you like that, my love? Very much so. He'd be a fool not to follow her orders. Good. Then no more negative thoughts and you might get to see it later. Very well, my queen. Small talk broke out between the pair, time passing quicker than either realized. Before long, Naruto returned to their table, smiling at the fact Persephone was sat beside her husband, and started by lowering their drinks onto the table. Both looked impressed with their drinks, noticing no spillage on the side of the cups nor on the tiny plates they were settled on. The goddess of spring could smell the coconut radiating from her drink, and let out a hum of delight the second her drink touched her lips. It was delicious. The coconut and the vanilla could be tasted evenly, and neither overpowered the other. It was perfectly balanced. Oh, that's amazing. She sunk into her husband's side without noticing Hades was still staring down at his drink. It looked good, and the smell of his Irish coffee was heavenly on his sense of smell. Though, he would admit the heart that the blonde owner had decorated on the foam of his drink put him off. Don't think about it, just enjoy it, and you'll be rewarded when you get home. He was getting his treat. Bringing his drink up to his mouth, Hades found himself pleasantly surprised. It was good. No, it was better than good. It was incredible. It was so good, that Hades checked whether any nectar had been added into the mix. It smelled like freshly baked cookies and tasted like dried fruits, orange peels and baking spices. It was light in body but packed a powerful punch. What whiskey did you use? Ton single malt Irish whiskey, Naruto replied. I keep a bottle in the office. Sometimes after I close up for the evening, I'll take a glass with me while I clean up. I'm not much of a drinker, but I like a whiskey from time to time. Hades nodded and offered his wife a sip of his drink, and appeared pleased when her mouth made a tiny O shape after taking a swig. It's good, huh? It's very good. The pair didn't wait long, and moments later, both were rendered awestruck as the plates of food were presented to them. Though for Hades, awestruck was his eyebrows lifting, and his jaw hanging open a minuscule amount. Still, to get the reaction from the god of the underworld was a praiseworthy feat. The moody god rarely showed emotion in front of mortals. Persephone though was much more vocal, and let it be known. Oh, my goodness. She clapped her hands together, her taste buds salivating the longer she stared at the dishes. All three of their orders appeared baked to perfection and were beautifully decorated. This is beyond what I imagined. Thank you for saying so, Naruto replied. I hope you enjoy your orders. If there will be anything else, let me know. I'll be stationed by the counter. The blonde gave a short bow out of courtesy and left the mesmerized couple alone to enjoy their meals. Pulling out a book from the counter, he crossed a leg over his knee and sat comfortably as the two immortals enjoyed their orders. Thank you very much, Persephone whispered, her eyes never leaving the three plates. She didn't know where to start. All three looked so appealing she was having a crisis just deciding where to begin. They look so good, but I don't know if I want to spoil the way they look. They're beautiful to look at. Hades looked at his wife and recognized the excitement rushing through her. Her face was mesmerized, and he couldn't blame her. Their food looked like something Hestia or his mother would create. This mortal was full of surprises. Licking the edge of his lips, Hades picked up the nearest fork and took a piece from the grapefruit tart. He planned on going from left to right. He heard Persephone gasp as if his action was unwarranted before she mimicking his actions. On the count of three, both brought their pieces up to their mouths, chewed for a couple of seconds, and promptly fell back into their chairs. Both their eyes glazed over in delight, their shoulders slumping in comfort, and their breathing synchronizing. Neither could have prepared for the onslaught of flavor that assaulted their taste buds. Holy gods above, this is the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. Persephone muttered, nothing even comes close. I'm sorry my love, but I think Hestia and your mother no longer hold the top spot anymore. She wasn't kidding. Gods and immortals were notoriously hard to please, in almost every way one could imagine. For a mortal to be talented enough to render herself in such a state with food was unfathomable. My love, are you okay? The goddess of spring waited a few moments before she got a response, only it wasn't the response she imagined. Instead of words coming out of her husband's mouth, it was a long and drawn-out moan of pure delight erupting from her husband's mouth. It was guttural, like the sound was coming from his very soul. Oh my. By the counter, Naruto didn't even look up from his book. He merely shook his head and continued to read. Persephone said nothing, nor did Hades react to the sight of his wife staring at him with surprise. Instead, he shocked Persephone by cutting a larger piece of the tart with his fork and chomping on the dessert as if it was about to disappear from his life forever. Though he remained silent after the second bite, the smile on his face grew wider and wider by the second. It was as if the tart was pumping pure happiness into the veins of the god of the underworld. Hey, no fair. Stick to your half. Persephone pushed her shock aside and wrestled her husband's fork away from the tart. She wanted another piece too. Don't make me poke you with the end of my fork, my love. It went on that way for the rest of their time spent at the fox's den. Never had the smile on Hades' face reached as wide as it did that afternoon as he ate cake and joked with his wife. Food was truly the way to a person's heart, and Persephone for one loved every second of it. Their afternoon that Valentine's Day became one of their happiest memories in recent memory, and served to cherish the love and bond husband and wife felt for each other. The blonde couldn't fathom the priceless service he'd provided for his two customers. Once the pair of immortals finished devouring the tart, they moved on to the tea cake. Once that was finished, they moved on to the Neapolitan cake. If the moans of delight that came from both Persephone and Hades were any indication, then the day had been a success in Naruto's eyes and ears. For the next couple of hours, the pair continued to order the same special dishes over and over again, and the blonde hadn't minded at all. Watching them out of the corner of his eye, the old shinobi felt old memories begin to stir in the back of his mind as a familiar beauty appeared in his mind. Hinata. Boy, he hadn't thought about his wife in a very long time. Not because he didn't want to see her beautiful face in his mind, but because when he did picture her, it only served to remind him of everything and everyone he'd lost. The ones that were forever out of his reach. Gone to a place he could never go. Sometimes when he was drifting off to sleep, he imagined her arms wrapping around his body, her head resting on his chest and her legs resting against his knees. Sleeping with Hinata beside him never failed to help lull him to sleep. Whether it was her steady breathing or the sound of her heart beating against his ear. She never failed to see the good in him. Even after becoming Hokage, and the stress and pressure of preserving the peace they all fought so hard to achieve began to pile higher and higher on his shoulders, she never failed to turn that weight as light as feather the moment he stepped inside their family home. Seeing her smiling face, her eyes full of love and arms awaiting his embrace, it was a feeling that he cherished to this day. Other times, he pictured Bolt and Himawari scooching into bed with them. Their son would tuck himself between his parents, his head resting on Hinata's ample chest, while Himawari would lounge against her father. Sometimes her legs would be strewn across his face, or her body horizontal over his stomach. His daughter could sleep in the strangest of positions. These days, he awoke to a cold and empty bed, serving to remind him of his place in the world. They had been gone a long time. Sometimes, for the briefest of moments, he could feel them standing next to him. However, as soon as he became aware of the feeling, it vanished as quickly as it came. He took it as their way of saying hello. Truth be told, he felt a little depressed when they entered his mind. Shaking his thoughts and feelings away while he was on the job, he noticed Mr. Underhill trying to catch his attention, and quickly moved over to fulfill his request. This was his life now, and deep down, he knew he couldn't dwell on the past. No good came from being stuck in the past. It was just hard letting it all go. What can I get for you? While Hades spoke to the blonde and ordered another set of the specials, the goddess of spring remained silent, an eerie feeling in the back of her mind. The hairs on the back of her neck were standing on end and goosebumps ran up and down her arms. She hid her surprise while her husband and the mortal conversed, and turned her head so she was facing the window. Why did she have this feeling someone was watching her? When her golden eyes noticed a figure standing in front of the window, the reason for the feeling became apparent. Ah, that's why. Standing behind the glass and going unnoticed by the mortals dotting the street was none other than the goddess of love, stood with her arms firmly set by her sides, her eyes a torrent of angry colors as she tried to glare a hole through the back of Persephone. She sported a new look, like she often would when the two goddesses met in the spring and summertime, with blonde hair in a bob-style haircut. Looking the woman up and down, she saw Aphrodite was wearing a very expensive-looking purple dress. It left an ample amount of cleavage and would have left men and women a salivating mess. It wasn't hard for Persephone to understand what the goddess had planned, and realized the goddess' plan was to entice the delightful blonde owner into joining her in the bedroom. Ha, not today. A smirk wove its way onto Persephone's face and took a sip of her wonderful drink, mouthing silently how amazing it was to the glaring goddess. The act was enough to make the goddess of love tremble, the glaring intensifying. Aphrodite would likely try and get her back for this in some creative form, but right now, she didn't have the heart to care. Instead, Persephone decided to do the childish thing, and give Aphrodite one last parting gift before returning to her husband's company. She brought up her hand and offered Aphrodite the bird, all the while her smirk widened. "My dear, what are you doing?" Her husband's voice brought her attention back to the table and found Hades and Naruto staring at her. The latter had his notepad and pen in his hand. "Nothing, darling. Nothing at all," she replied, adopting an innocent smile as she clasped her hands together. "Another round of everything then? That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.